Yeah.
All right. You're gonna do it. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, folks. We have a special one here today, doing a live stream because we have a special guest. This is my best friend Ian. He is a YouTuber himself, does some Broadway video essays. Him and his boyfriend Trey, they have their own kind of, they're big time Broadway fans. Are they professionals? No, they're just super amateurs that are super experts in, like, a layman armchair sense to, like, how to relate maybe some of the actual experts to, us super laymen that barely touch musicals, and, like, maybe sort of equivalent with what Brady and I do with some, like, Shakespeare research or history research. And so
Pseudo professional.
He's
People who care too much for no reason.
I will let him, like, tell his whole story in a second, but we wanted to have him on because he and I constantly have conversations about theater back then. With Shakespeare, Chettle, Marston, Kidd, the whole lot of the Renaissance theater crowd, and then comparing that with the theater now. That's what he knows. That's what he's obsessed with, specifically musicals, but not only limited to musicals. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. But we're going to hit a bunch of different topics. I'm going to give you some other spiels. Brady's got some stuff. Ian's got some stuff of his own. We're going to talk Stephen Sondheim. Going to talk William Shakespeare. Going to talk canonicity. Going to talk collaboration in the theater. And whatever you guys want to say or want to hear us talk about, chime in. So, yeah, come on in. Water's warm.
Absolutely excited.
And that's usually when we cut, but we're on a live stream, so I'm going to pass it on over to Brady. What do you think, Brady? How's it going?
It's going well. We're all sharing a nice drink here, of course, as we do on most of our shows, which I don't know if it's a good habit or not, but
It gets us in the muse,
there you go. That's a good excuse.
Actually, segue a little.
Ex-muse.
Stephen Sondheim actually was super into that. He would drink with a shot. He would write with a shot glass.
Really?
Yeah, a shot glass of liquor, because he thought that just 1 ounce was enough. That it'll keep you just loose enough, and if you need another, you're gonna have to get up to go get it. So
Yeah. Okay.
can't get too drunk.
Yeah. It's like, not gonna put my roommate on blast, but he's got a system, and it's like it's pretty methodical and it's pretty efficient, so he gets stuff done. Let's see. Before we dive too far into a big discussion, just maybe do a little round circle here. What have you been watching or reading or listening to lately, Brady?
I tried watching or finishing the 2015 Macbeth movie.
Okay.
And yeah, I was super interested, but I was watching in bed at like 10:30 at night and fell asleep.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is great, and then I was down. And then I tried watching the 2021 Green Knight. It was 2022.
Okay. Yeah. The new one.
Same thing. I was like, oh man, this is great. This is awesome. Same thing. Watching it 10:30 at night, and I got 3 kids, and so I don't know. I'm like zonked at that point, and I'm like ready to go. Finally got some downtime, and I'm just like out. Like,
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get around to it. I'm still reading.
Completely empathized.
I'm still working through this book. I just have the leaflet or the dust jacket over here. But yeah, still working on Little Big. I'll eventually do a review on it because I found this through Francis Yates.
Oh,
Actually,
Crawley.
and I may have mentioned it in a comment somewhere, but Francis Yates is in another book as a character by the same author. But this one as a story stuck out to me more, so I've been reading that a lot. And then To Chance Is Right, I put it back on the shelf just to complete it, is The Elder Gods of England by Stephen Paulington. It's right here. Bing! No, this one.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's just going through a lot of pre-Christian sort of culture stuff in England specifically, or Anglo-Saxon England. And so yeah, talking a lot about Beowulf. I told you some stuff about Beowulf and Cadmon's hymn that they kind of talked about in there. Slowly going through it. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been reading lately.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Ian and I actually thought maybe we could talk about Beowulf a little bit.
Yeah.
At some point, 'cause, maybe that's like the earliest piece of musical theater.
That was one piece I was just gonna make. Not only that, but like the very first kind of recorded piece of musical theater of English literature is a piece of musical theater, and
it's not just the earliest piece of musical theater, but
it's also the earliest
literature
piece
may
of,
be founded on musical theater. It's not something that Brady and I are like huge fans of, like that kind of
right.
Scary. It's like, wait, no, that's supposed to be the silly vaudeville stuff, and all of a sudden, no, it may be like foundational, and that's a discussion we'll go into that.
I mean, because like honestly, like think about it, even medieval stuff like Canterbury Tales, like you're supposed to hear that to music, right? Mm. Like you are missing a component when you read that in a book.
I guess
because we kind of mentioned that in our last episode.
Can we pull up a clip on YouTube? I forget his name, Benjamin. Just look up Beowulf Benjamin live.
Sometimes YouTube will kick you off if they're doing certain stuff, but we can look at it though. Maybe not play it. But what were you? What's the point of looking?
He literally performs Beowulf live. That's really? What he does in Anglo-Saxon in its original text, using what we conceive to be the correctly reconstructed accent.
What's his name?
It's Benjamin something. Bagby, thank you. Yep.
Baggins.
Yeah, it's him.
That's right here.
That's the main.
All right, I'll share with the audience now, so that way they can see what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So this guy does it live with a lyre or some kind of horsehair.
Some of it's just him kind of projecting in poetic style, but sometimes it turns into out and out singing. And if some of you guys grew up, Catholic or Lutheran or something like that, sometimes at church when the preacher or the priest is reading out scripture, it some parts would turn into songs like hymn style, and so he said so and so, and then
I mean, you can still see influence in modern movies. I mean, look at John Williams, right? John Williams is using your Wagner principles. He's using ancient Gregorian chants and your Dies Irae. Like we are referencing pieces that were theater,
Yeah.
At one point.
And that any you Oxfordians out there, this should all ring pretty true, because the idea that Shakespeare was very into music totally aligns with what we see of De Vere. De Vere's big patron of not just playwrights and other kind of writers. We do know that De Vere's a patron of music. He is friends with musicians. It may be up for debate how good at music and music theory De Vere was himself. You listen to some Oxfordians and this dude's a proto-Bach. And you listen to some other people and he's just an enthusiast that really appreciates it and tries and maybe has a little bit of talent, but this idea that music is interrelated with theater, that's going to be a big theme with tonight's chat. Real quick, what have you been watching or reading lately, Ian? Because I know you got some stuff.
Oh man, nothing that's gonna make me any fans. We've been brushing up on some Sondheim stuff together, but then I've personally been watching the Echo Show, which was a really disappointment to me. It started really good. Those first 5 episodes are fantastic.
Marvel shout out, guys.
Yeah, tanked real hard. That's how not to write. Deus Ex Machinas, man. No. Deus Ex Machinas are a thing, and lazy writing, man.
Yeah, pulp writing, and I don't know,
Hey man, don't pull Conan into this, but no, I'm just playing.
No shade to Robert Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs and all that. Well, maybe some shade to Edgar Rice Burroughs, but comic books are great for what they are, but there's a reason that the comic book industry isn't the biggest thing on the planet, and like it totally oversaturated in the 90s, and there was a real issue with like trying to keep universes going when you're constantly putting out content. You run through story arcs, and you have to recycle, and you have to redo all these things, and you have to get really creative, and for a little bit you can get some gold, but after a while, like, you run out of stuff. Everything's been done. People are oversaturated. People don't want to see it, and I just think that the Hollywood Marvel scene has too much mirrored what happened with the comic books, and
I get that. I think,
and so like
I think the writing department has just there used to be a standard that isn't being upheld anymore.
yeah.
Okay. You know what I mean? And I think, a couple years ago, a lazy Deus Ex Machina like that would have been. Oh no!
Yeah, not kosher.
Yeah, we can't do that.
That'd been cut on the writing room floor.
Like I don't think
that doesn't even get to filming.
I don't think I think this show actually did a good job of showing us a community we don't normally get to see. Yeah. I think it did a good job in showing us, a differently abled person like succeeding because of their, disability. But like none of that was my issue with it. My issue was simply that at the end she used her magic powers to make her problem go away. And, isn't
that kind of you and Jamie's problem with Force Awakens?
That was definitely something that it suffered from is it's just a sort of just not the properly like earned power set. Not that they can't have that power, but there's not that proper like gap of like getting us there.
We didn't earn it.
Reward, exactly. And so, but I don't want to go down that road.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's its own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see real quick. I've been reading like my hair's on fire. Ian can give a Hamilton quote or something there.
Non-stop.
Yeah, non-stop. Let's see. I'm struggling, guys. I hurt my hand the other day, so I'm left-handed, so trying to do this with my non-dominant hand, which I'm getting better. But what I have here is a really cool book. It's called The Disputed Plays of William Shakespeare, and it's basically like, a little folio of Apocrypha. It's got Edward III, Arden of Faversham, The Merry Devil of Edmonton, A Yorkshire Tragedy, Locrine, Musidorus, The London Prodigal, The Puritan, or The Widow of Watling Street, The Life and Death of Thomas, Lord Cromwell, The Birth of Merlin, or The Child Hath Found His Father, and the first part of Sir John Oldcastle. Like, maybe some of you guys know these deep cuts, but the rest of us, like, what are these plays? Like, some of these, I've never heard of some of these, but actually, I've read a few of these now, and they're pretty good. Like, even Sir John Oldcastle, like, I've read critics call it a tiresome play, a bore, stuffy, clearly has its own political and propaganda agenda. And it's like, yeah, sure, maybe all those things are true, but it's still kind of a fun play. Like, it's a little rompy, stompy history play, and yeah, does it prop up Sir John Oldcastle as this, overly moralistic, great hero character? Sure, but like,
who for the reference, Oldcastle is supposed to be the same family as who Falstaff is, right?
Yeah. So our Falstaff character in the Henry IV plays, who's this fat slob that can't do anything right, and blames everybody else and steals stuff, and just horrible person, especially to a Victorian morality. Although to a lot of people, he's the greatest character in Shakespeare. But Falstaff was offensive to Lord Cobham because Falstaff wasn't actually called Falstaff. Falstaff was originally called Sir John Oldcastle, and Sir John Oldcastle was a real guy. And Lord Cobham, though not related to him, has the same title as John Oldcastle. John Oldcastle himself would have been known as Lord Cobham, and so Lord Cobham, a.k.a. William Brooke, it's like, dude, what the heck? Why are you smearing John Oldcastle's name in the dirt? Like, he was awesome. Like, change the name. And so, yeah, they changed the name, or at least so the narrative goes. More scrutiny needs to be done with this whole kind of event situation. But, yeah, it gets changed to Falstaff. We all know Falstaff now. But apparently at their time, during Shakespeare, he isn't known as Falstaff all the time. Plenty of people, once it's already been changed to Falstaff, still call him Oldcastle. And they keep referring to him as Oldcastle. And so the theory goes that around the year 1600, Henslowe got hired by William Brooke to get some of his writers to do another play to give Sir John Oldcastle some real proper treatment. And so Michael Drayton, Robert Wilson, I forget the other two, Anthony Munday, and... No, God, thank God, no. Richard Hathaway, thank you. Richard Hathaway, Anthony Munday, Robert Wilson, and Michael Drayton are the co-writers of it, and yeah, it's a neat little play. It's kind of fun. I kind of enjoyed it. I learned a new word. I can't say it on YouTube or we'll get kicked off, but
Yeah.
it's great. By the way,
That's a great word.
Kozlenko,
That's a great word.
the editor of this book, edits the word out, and I had
You
to
did get
go
kicked
do
off
some
on
digging.
YouTube for that?
Can you?
I don't think
I
that.
said it's not for kids. We should be fine. I
Okay.
think, yeah.
The word is so.
It's a great word. Yeah. This is the
Yeah.
academic
So-
discussion.
It's seen in page we can put up on the.
Yeah,
on the
Yes,
website,
this is purely academic.
This is the
I
Merlin
want to say
story,
no.
right?
This is actually Sir John Oldcastle,
Okay.
and we'll get to Merlin too. I want to talk about that in a second.
That's right. Sir
This
John
should be
Oldcastle.
Sir John Oldcastle, Act 4, Scene 4.
Okay.
Let me see.
Get to the good stuff.
I wanted to say it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right to the poop jokes, ladies and gentlemen.
hey,
No,
don't
spoiler alert.
spoil anything. It's unfair to these amazing people who are waiting for this.
44. I may be wrong with that number.
Wait, so this is. I'm sorry, please. Is John Oldcastle by Shakespeare or not?
So Sir John
Is it in the
Oldcastle.
folio?
No.
Okay.
Well, not that one.
Yeah.
It's in the false folio.
Oh, it's in the false folio. Okay.
Yes. So it is printed in 1619 as by Shakespeare.
Because if I just put it in here, it's like by Shakespeare is one of the.
So yeah, the facsimile that we have says it's by Shakespeare, and that's why it's in this book as disputed play. And actually, just go to the first act. I can't find. So there's two
Spell
references.
the word.
That's gonna give it away, dude.
Yeah. Okay.
here,
Well, why don't you like preface this as what it used to be first? Okay. So you tell us how you came across this word, because I think that's half the fun.
Okay, so here, let me find the where he says it. Looking for the third footnote. I'm so bad at finding these footnotes, guys. I'm so sorry. These footnotes.
How dare you not find a footnote?
But yeah, if you just look for the word knave, it's right before.
Yeah. Which shout out to the RPG Dave, made by a YouTuber. It's called Questing Beast, the King Arthur reference. They're shipping out the book soon for the Kickstarter, so I'm super eager to get my copy. So.
Okay. Man.
It must be near the start of the play.
Here we go. Yes, Act 1, Scene 1. We have Owen saying, "Gaw, my Lord Herbert's man is a dirty knave." That is what Kozlenko has here. What do you have here?
It has the same thing where it says,
Owen says, "My Lord's man's a," and then says, not dirty knave, but shittin' knave. And so Kozlenko edits that word out twice in this play. And when he, in his footnote, let me read his footnote. It's kind of hilarious. I have substituted the word dirty for one of similar signification, but exceedingly offensive.
Oh my god.
So yeah, this book there doesn't even freaking tell me what the word is, so I had to go do what you did and go look it up. And then I found that word, and I was like, wait, is that word what does that mean? And if you look it up, it literally means made of, like the same way that we say like, a woolen scarf or a hempen cap. Yeah, a shitten knave. You're full of, and like, what a fun word, guys! What a great word! And so, to heck with Kozlenko's Victorian censorship, but it's fine. I found the word that I need to find. And so yeah, if for no other reason, read Sir John Oldcastle for that word. Ha ha he he he. That said, I think it's a fantastic one to read for authorship concerns because most of it does not read like Shakespeare. Like maybe the induction kind of sounds like Shakespeare, so the little intro speech before the play begins kind of sounds like Shakespeare. But then towards the very end, you start to get to some stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, this kind of sounds like King John, or this sounds like maybe some of the stuff in Henry VI. At some point, this just sounds like some of Shakespeare's good, like rompy, stompy, maybe some Julius Caesar stuff. Just cool historical stuff, giving it to you, kind of factually fun, adventurous. And sure enough, that's going to be Michael Drayton. That's Michael Drayton in this play. And if you go back to the start of our whole channel, we say John Stotzenberg says there are two writers that are more important than anybody else in the plays of Shakespeare, and that is Thomas Dekker and Michael Drayton. And so Michael Drayton, if you want to try and spot him, well, the only play that you can read by Michael Drayton is the first part of Sir John Oldcastle, which he probably only has a hand in some parts of Act 4 and 5. And so it's not much to go by. It's hundreds of pages of poetry. But if you want to try and spot Michael Drayton, if you want to understand what Michael Drayton is, you got to go read Sir John Oldcastle. Monday's supposed to have written that as well. Monday's an interesting character. Wilson and Hathaway are more what's happening. Also, fun fact, William Shakespeare's father-in-law is also named Richard Hathaway, and people have never been able to fully say for sure that the guy in Henslow's diary that's named Richard Hathaway is not Shakespeare's father-in-law. It's probably not likely that it is, but it's possible.
Possible.
But, of course, we're Shakespeare doubters, so it's like, who are any of these people? I don't know. Okay, I also want to talk about the birth of Merlin, but before I do, I'm going to talk about this essay that I've been reading. I've been reading several essays about the same thing, but I've been reading a bunch of Henry VI essays. And Henry VI is super interesting. One, because it's, 3 plays? You get Henry VI up here.
I may have one part. Isn't it a 2-parter, or is it just a...
It's a 3-parter.
3-parter.
I have, I gotta get Brady a copy of the Signet one with, because it's got all 3 together. But it's, like, the only, straight up trilogy, where it's just all 3 have parts. You see that all throughout the Henslow Diary. So-and-so does part 1, then later on they do part 2, and then they bang out part 3, or they'll bang out part 1 and part 2, and then they'll make a prequel, and then later on they're going to get called part 1, 2, and 3, stuff like that. That's what we have here with Henry VI, and it's supposed to be one of Shakespeare's earliest plays, but if you go read the actual mainstream Orthodox scholars, they will tell you that this is a collaborative play. Shakespeare did not write all of this play. Some will, a few will, but overwhelmingly the new updated consensus is that Shakespeare did Act 2, Scene 4, some parts of Act 4, and then probably not much else. Maybe there's some other points of debate.
Why are we drawing a line there?
And
why would he do a scene from one show but have sole ownership of others? That doesn't...
See, that's interesting.
It doesn't make sense to me.
And so Ian's a Shakespeare fan, but he's not a big time, he doesn't go down the Shakespeare authorship rabbit hole. He lets me just kind of filter it through him,
Sure.
And so it's wait, if Shakespeare's just doing little chunk parts collaboratively in this one play, do we say that about other plays? And Orthodox scholars are a little wishy-washy on this. They'll say yes. Look, Timon of Athens, Shakespeare splits that up with Middleton. Titus Andronicus, George Peele wrote the first act of that. Two Noble Kinsmen and Henry VIII are probably mostly written by Fletcher and only a few scenes by Shakespeare. So there you go, Ian. There's some collaboration. How about that? And it's like, okay, sure, that sounds cool at first, but that's literally a collection of like Shakespeare's weakest plays.
Interesting.
And so it's like, wait, and like
There's all the later ones too, right?
yeah, they're either super early or super late. But prime peak Shakespeare, there's no co-writing in Hamlet.
You know, that makes absolutely no sense to me. Just from a theater perspective, first of all, if you look at it from a modern theater perspective, theater is, and I'm sure has always been, a collaborative art form.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think also when you talk about how even, the general acceptance of how theater was produced back then, from my understanding, they had about 24 hours to put up a show. They were workshopping it all day, or they were workshopping it for the performance later that day, and then they would work on it the next show the night before. But regardless, it seemed like they had a really short turnaround time.
Yeah. Especially this Henslow crowd, they'd get hired out, and they usually needed to have it fully, completely written. If they had to do it themselves, maybe 2 weeks or a month at most, but usually it's like, yeah, you and 4 other guys got to bang these parts out, and you got to do it in a few weeks max.
Right, and all rehearsals were done directly prior.
Yeah.
So people didn't have time to inhabit these roles, and I'm assuming it also seems like they were. So if something was a success, okay, you do it again. That makes sense, right? You do it maybe a week or two later. Now people are more excited to go see it the second time. It also gives you a chance to tweak whatever didn't work, whatever jokes didn't land. You pull them, you do a different one. But all of this is a collaborative process.
Right.
Also, you're dealing with actors who don't read, right?
Right.
A lot of them who don't read, right?
Right.
So you have to be training them to be doing their jobs and retain that information somewhere in their head. And it seems to me, it's such a collaborative process, and then you describe the actual process that scholars think was how theater was made, and you're like,
At least
well, that sounds more collaborative than it is done today.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll say this about the Henslow writers. They'll say it about Marlowe and Thomas Kidd. We know that they lived together. They must have been collaborating, and we see lines from stuff we call kids plays and lines from stuff we call Marlowe plays that totally match up. So they must be working together and collaborating. And okay, that's all great. All that adds up. And then what about Shakespeare? You only get the margins of Shakespeare collaboration.
And
they'll say Middleton had the Hecate song in Macbeth, but no actual real good parts in it. It's just a couple silly lines. But
okay, so let's also take another example. There are several musicals that have been written by a singular person. It doesn't happen often. First of all, that does not happen often.
Right.
Usually there's one person who writes the book, one person who writes the lyrics, one person who writes the music. Sometimes you do music and lyrics. Sometimes you do lyrics and book.
There's a lot of partners in musicals too.
Right. Yeah. So there's usually some sort of combination. But say you are someone who did all 3 parts of that and you wrote the whole thing. Well, you still have orchestrators. You still have a director.
Yeah.
Who the director's vision, the staging can interpret the text.
Right. And so
if something happens in the text, then that's now something that is canon or that has influenced the scene or colors the scene in a different way.
Ian was showing me a TikTok. I'm not the biggest Romeo and Juliet fan, but the most famous scene maybe in Shakespeare's songs To Be Not To Be is maybe Romeo, Romeo, where far art thou, Romeo, and it's, where is Juliet saying that from? She's always on what?
It's a balcony, right?
It's a balcony, right? But if you read the play, there's no mention of a balcony. What's he say? She's in a window. It says above in a window.
And also, balconies.
Yeah, like they don't exist in Renaissance England. Like, that's totally a Baroque and a neoclassical establishment in England. That stuff only exists down in southern Italy.
Right, it's too cold for a balcony in England. Yeah, in southern Italy, sure.
Yeah, right. You probably need one to air out your hot, concrete room pre-AC. But, like, yeah. But why is there a balcony scene in there? Well, it's added in this neoclassical period by, David Garrick or Thomas Otway?
It was Thomas Otway.
Okay.
So Thomas Otway did a parody of Romeo and Juliet. And this parody of Romeo and Juliet had interpreted it as a balcony scene. And then it had become so popular that when they started actually doing Romeo and Juliet again, then Romeo and Juliet had to have a balcony scene in it.
Wow. So, like, the parody, actually preceded the version of it.
Interesting. I don't know, because I'm remembering this from the book that we had talked about a couple of times, The Theater of the World, that's right behind you. But here is a depiction of Robert Flood's, and this is once again maybe based on
And this
Yates' take
definitely
on
gets into
why
a...
This is, yeah, it's a little pedantic here, but also I think this is a box. There's a difference between a box and a balcony, and they had different purposes, and an actor wouldn't necessarily play up from there. And that was something that they pointed, right? That's where someone who is coming to be spectated watching the play is sitting.
Yeah, I think because, there was a part where, they talk about people, spectating up here, but then in some other parts where specifically I'm just thinking about, because we just read in The Tempest, and they use some kind of part up here where they talk about specifically...
Upper stage,
Yeah, upper stage, Prospero's doing something, and I don't know if maybe I'm misreading that's something down here or whatever.
That was something Ian and I discussed, that I had a contention with this TikToker that she was making it sound like that Shakespeare did it on even ground, that, he's just talking directly, Juliet's talking directly to Romeo, but no, he was at a higher level, but she was at a higher level, she would have been up on the upper stage, but it wouldn't have been on a literal balcony, it would have been something like this,
right,
where it's either walking out a doorway onto a ledge or talking out through a window. A balcony is its own specific landing that comes out of a doorway that has its own.
And I think part of her point was also a balcony is a safe space, right? It's still in the house. You're still on a second story. You are still removed away, right? You are safe, but she's also not guarded. When in that scene, she is thinking she's alone. She goes, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? She thinks she's alone, right? So it's the start, like, he comes along and is like, oh, well, here I am. And she's like, creeper. Like, what? I thought I was alone. And adding the balcony adds a part of her still being in her house, but in a place that isn't.
It's even more safe. Outside, more open.
Right? Yeah. So it
works just a little better than a window.
And it works better than, a window. Yeah, it works better because she has made a decision to go out.
And it works even better than a ledge, because a ledge, it gives the idea that you can walk to another doorway. You can walk away. A balcony is restricted to that one doorway.
Right.
And so you either have to retreat back to the protection, or you have to stay out and force it.
Again, pedantic, but what do we talk about that isn't pedantic?
Yeah, well, and I think that was an important distinction to like, so, because she, like, that same TikToker definitely calls out X40s at the end, because she's like, De Vere actually went to Italy, and he would have seen a balcony, and so the fact that Shakespeare didn't put a balcony in, like, proves that Shakespeare wasn't De Vere, which... It's not great. It's not the greatest logic, guys. I'm gonna be honest. It's not great logic. I see what she's trying to say, but like, if nobody in England knows what the heck a balcony is, even if you've seen a balcony and know what a balcony is, you're probably not gonna write a balcony into your scene if if people don't know what that is, they don't know what it is. And if your theater doesn't have one, your theater doesn't have one. You can call it a window at some point. Like, he may have written it as a balcony, but because people don't know what that is, it's like, all right, just call it a window then. People are, oh, God, you know?
Right.
So, I don't know. Like, I don't think it's, like, the strongest points. And also, you know, that whole Italy versus not going to Italy thing's a pretty tired, hackneyed argument, and I think the Shakespeare doubters have kind of successfully won that one, that whoever Shakespeare is or are definitely have big knowledge of Italy, Italian literature, Italian geography, not just, you know, current Italian stuff, but going back all into the Renaissance, into all the way back to Rome, dude.
Like that one, the John Florio channel. She's she's Italian, so she's clearly able to tell, like, hey, this little reference here, that's like the specific Italian battle that was done in this planet or whatever.
Honestly,
you know,
so many of us English readers don't even have the wherewithal to say whether or not Shakespeare does.
Or sometimes we don't even have the way to like spot that a reference is even going on sometimes because that shit's so specific. It's like, oh, you're like two, you know, a red bird and a yellow bird fighting each other, and you know, on a something kind of field, and it's like, oh, that's specifically this Italian battle, talking about these two houses,
from
blah, blah,
1317, down in the region of Capua.
Yes.
I didn't. Dang. Okay.
Right. I mean, there's certain things that you can just, from cultural context, it's like, oh, well, they use that word. That's pointed because they use that word.
Yeah, and like...
And it's like, well, I'll never know that.
Yeah.
Doing some
like,
pinch on it.
I can maybe, like, guess that that's supposed to be a thing, but, like, trying to, like, pinpoint what that means and why it's there, like, forget about it. Alright, my bad, guys. I want to talk about Bertha Merlin real quick. Like, I'm not going to hijack this whole thing. But Bertha Merlin... Oh my God, guys! You know, raise your hand if you've read Bertha Merlin.
On this,
Yeah, nobody's read. Like, I've heard of this title and I've seen it listed in the Shakespeare Apocrypha, but I never took it seriously. Like, the little printout looks silly. It's printed so late. That title doesn't sound anything like Shakespeare. It's like, no way. Like, no way this is Shakespeare.
I love that, like, the only article on the Wikipedia is the authorship. Like no one even cares about the content. It's just the authorship. Like, who cares about critical reception or its themes?
Nothing.
Fuck it. Like, let's just go straight to the authorship.
And like, let's like look at what they say about the authorship real quick. The 1662 first edition, so this is going to be printed right after the Civil War closes and you're allowed to start doing theater again. The first edition was printed 1662. It attributed the play to William Shakespeare and William Raleigh. We got the double Will crew. William Raleigh, if you don't know who that is, you see his name on a bunch of plays around the 1620s. And he is often co-writing with a handful of really top-notch dudes. He's co-writing with John Webster, co-writing with John Ford, co-writing with Thomas Dekker, co-writing with Thomas Heywood, co-writing with Thomas Middleton. Maybe it should have said Middleton first, because that's probably where most of Raleigh's famous stuff is. But in the case of all of them, he is doing the comic subplots, usually clown stuff, which is funny because like that's what Heywood did back in the earlier days, in the the Henslow days. Heywood gets reduced to doing the clown stuff, but like it's like now that Heywood's a bigger name in the 1620s, Raleigh has to do it, and Heywood can do the main stuff. So that said, okay, Raleigh, cool. Well, if you keep reading, it says Merlin is thus one of two plays published in 17th century Shakespeare collaboration, the other being Two Noble Kinsmen. Most scholars reject the attribution to Shakespeare and believe the play is Raleigh's, perhaps with a different collaborator. Wait, what? Who wrote this play? It's not Shakespeare. And it's Raleigh's. Raleigh wrote comic subplots. This man did not write this entire play. Are you kidding me? And that's okay. Well, perhaps with a different collaborator. Then who? And then so it says, well, it shares this significant relationship with Cupid's Revenge, a play in the Beaumont Fletcher canon. which they don't mention it on here either. Maybe I'll go ahead and add it to this page. It also shares a ton in common with a Middleton play that's coming out right around this same time. And so people said, Birth of Merlin must be a Middleton play. Middleton wrote with Raleigh. Yes. Except Birth of Merlin doesn't really read like Middleton. And so I think that this is probably the case of it's a rival play of Middleton. So you probably have Middleton and Dekker writing the Middleton play. And this Birth of Merlin is probably Webster, Heywood, Raleigh. Maybe Dekker has a few parts in here as well. Maybe there's some other names, but it's definitely Webster and Heywood. It's absolutely Webster and Heywood. But you folks need to tell me why I'm right or wrong, and you just need to go read The Birth of Merlin, because nobody's reading The Birth of Merlin. This play is awesome, guys. And, to Ian's criticism, he said, all they have here is on authorship, and then what have I done? I've just yammered for 5 minutes about authorship and haven't talked about the play. This play is awesome. It opens up on our main character, who's this, super down-to-earth guy who's, super level-headed, and his name is Clown. And Clown is wandering about trying to find his sister, who's this nice country girl, and he finds her, and she's super depressed because she's pregnant, and she doesn't really know by who exactly. She knows who, she remembers the guy, but she doesn't know who he is. He's some stranger that she met in the woods, and they had this fling, and
as one does.
And her name is Joan Go-To-It. And, and her brother's name is Clown. And, she gets pregnant, and very quickly, within, a day, she has the baby. And the baby comes out, it's a little kid, but it's a little kid that's got a man's face and a man's beard. And then starts growing real quick, and by, a day or two later, is, a full-grown young man. This kid's name is Merlin. And this guy that was the random guy in the woods that goes with Joan Go-To-It, he's the devil.
Oh my god.
So, yeah.
It escalated quickly.
But she doesn't know that it's the devil, or at least won't admit that it's the devil. And so the clown the whole time's dude, well, we have to find who the dad is, because I'm not going to pay for this child support. You kidding me? We're going to find the dad, and we're going to make him do right and marry you. And meanwhile, our actual serious plot is that we have almost tripartite war between the Britons, the Saxons, who are invading Britain at this time, and the Welsh, who are, distinguished as a different kind of Celtic than the British Celts. And so those three are kind of all at odds with each other. And Merlin, as he's literally burst on the scene, comes in to try and work that out. But there's a lot of carryover with Titus in that King Aurelius, who is the brother of Uther Pendragon, he sort of gets seduced by the evil Saxon queen, and the kingdom starts falling apart, and it needs to be avenged, which that's what happens in Titus. Not Titus, but the emperor starts getting with this evil Saxon Gothic queen. Sorry, not Saxon, but Gothic queen, Northern Germanic. And so, that's the Brits, their whole kingdom's going to fall, but then Merlin goes and he teams up with the Welsh dudes, but then the Welsh dudes, are taken down by Uther Pendragon and the good Brits, and then, so Merlin's well, I knew that was going to happen because I can tell the future, and then he gets the Brits, and then they go back and they take back over from the evil Saxons, the end sort of thing. But there's all sorts of cool magic, and there's all these interweavings of characters, and it, really the devil and clown thing seems like this stupid subplot, but somehow it's totally interrelated because this whole thing hovers on Merlin and this Merlin figure. And so if you watched our recent video about The Tempest, that, me and Brady were a little lukewarm on that play, that, we said it's cool and got some cool aspects, but it just didn't hit like we wanted it to.
Yeah.
This is the Tempest that we deserved.
Interesting.
Birth of Merlin is it's got all that cool John Dee magic, medieval occult stuff, and it's got gods and mythology, and, It literally has laser light shows. There's 2 different dragon laser light shows that happen in this.
Dragon laser light shows.
Yes. I'm like that's not even some crazy hyperbolic.
Explain yourself.
So these, while like war is like breaking out, sometimes
Lasers.
meteors will like come in and like like in Julius Caesar Ides of March stuff that eclipses happen or something. Their progenitors of bad signs. So like in this dude, no, it's not just some crazy meteor or something. Just the like Aurora Borealis type stuff is popping up in the skies, and it's 2 dragons fighting each other and interweaving and like flames going in and out, and that like and the whole time Merlin's watching it and explaining to people like, no, this symbolizes this and this symbolizes this, but we can't fight fate and we just have to watch it and like read it for what it is and react accordingly. And it's like, what is going on, guys? Like, what is happening? And like, I don't know, man. Like, me writing.
How is the language?
Like I said, I think it's at least 3 different authors, and so some parts, like the parts that are probably the Haywood, it's like Haywood usually does, super pretty and beautiful and sounds Shakespearean, except has no handle on meter whatsoever, and so it's got to all be done in prose, and so every now and then lines get a little sententious and clunky, but like Haywood and a lot of other places, it reads kind of like Shakespeare. It's clean, it's fun, it's not clean as in like morally clean, but like
Yeah, sure.
yeah, the linguistically, lyrically clean.
Right.
And then it's clearly also got Webster in it, so it's got all these great kind of speeches like "Away you cur" and the kind of really Shakespeare-y, angry, prophetic kind of. Let me see if I can just.
Is Rowley an alternate spelling of Raleigh or Raleigh or Raleigh?
I've wondered
Soltron.
that. Like, it seems like it can be a variant spelling. I don't think people say that Rowley is related to Raleigh, but I do think that they're like variant etymologies. Like they're the same kind of word. They're from the same meaning, which is a lea, like a land or a clearing or a meadow. Raw means like woods, I want to say, or like it's related to
my
rough.
stream stuff.
But William Raleigh, people don't know exactly. Maybe the brother of Samuel Raleigh. So Samuel Raleigh's a name in the Henslow Diary, and Samuel Raleigh's one of the people that's doing the additions to Dr. Faustus. So there's A version and B version. B version's got the additions, and that is Samuel Raleigh and William Byrd, I think. And so Samuel Raleigh is maybe the older brother of William Raleigh. Samuel Raleigh was also supposed to be an actor / writer for Henslow and didn't do the big important stuff, maybe did the silly comedies. I don't know if whoever the Samuel Raleigh writer is, I don't know if that pops up in Shakespeare. But William Raleigh, even though he's not supposed to be around until 1622, like everything that I've read that has William Raleigh's name on it is pretty freaking awesome, actually. Like the Changeling, that's Middleton and Raleigh, I like that more than The Witch, which is, I think, supposed to be just Middleton. Or The Witch of Edmonton, which is yet another different play, that's Decker, Ford, and Raleigh. And I like Witch of Edmonton even more than The Changeling. And so, I don't know, whoever Raleigh is seems to be in some good stuff. Here's some, let me find some quote from Birth of Merlin, see if I can find Uther Pendragon and make one of his. Okay, yeah. Here's him watching. It says, another part of the field, a blazing star appears. Flourish of trumpets. Enter Prince Uther, Edal, Cador, Edwin, Toclio with drum and soldiers. Look, Edal. This is Uther Pendragon talking. Look, Edal. Still this fiery exhalation shoots his frightful horrors on the amazed world. See in the beam that bouts his flaming ring a dragon's head appears, from out whose mouth 2 flaming stakes of fire stretch east and west. Edal says, and see from forth the body of the star. 7 smaller blazing streams directly point on this affrighted kingdom. Cawdor says, "'Tis a dreadful meteor," Edwin says, "and doth portend strange fears." Prince, "This is no crown of peace. This angry fire has something more to burn than Vortigern. If it alone were pointed at his fall, it would pull in its blazing pyramids and be appeased, for Vortigern is dead." So, while they're watching this fire star thing in the distance, what this fire is, it's actually a church or a building that's got all the Welsh army locked up in it, and they're burning it. Like, what? This is great, guys. This is so heavy. This is so heavy hitting. I don't know, guys. This is crazy.
It's like, I don't know, that's like chasing windmills on crack.
Here's Merlin saying, sort of at the end of this scene, So, now observe, my lord, and there behold above yon flame-haired beam that upward shoots appears a dragon's head, out of whose mouth 2 streaming lights point their flame-feathered darts contrary ways, yet both shall have their aims. Again, behold, from this igniscyrant body 7 splendid and illustrious rays are spread, all speaking heralds to Britain this isle, and thus they are expounded. The dragon's head is the hieroglyphic that figures out your princely self, and there must reign a king, those biformed fires that from the dragon's mouth shoot east and west, emblem 2 royal babes which shall proceed from you, and a son and daughter, her pointed constellation northward bending. Crowns her a queen in Ireland, of whom first springs, and of course this is like one of those things like where they're now trying to connect, Queen Elizabeth and her mythology back all the way to King Arthur and Merlin, right? Yeah. This is a way of kind of justifying Queen Elizabeth stuff, but that's interesting because this is supposed to be 1620 something. So maybe it's not. Maybe it's earlier, and we don't have a great handle on. We don't have a great handle on when this was written or who it's written by. But maybe it's even earlier than people are guessing. But I would just like people to go check this out. I don't think all of it reads exactly like Shakespeare. I think all of it's pretty darn good. Some of it's silly, some of it's fun, some of it's clunky. But there are parts of it that's like, wow, this is great. This is great character work. This is just great. Clearly, it's going to have some great dramaturgy that's going to come with it. So clearly, this is whoever's doing this is clearly thinking about the stage. And then I don't know, this just lyrically.
I feel like I taught you that word.
Thank you. Yes. I've been seeing it in these essays too, and it's like crap. I gotta know it when I talk to him on the phone, and then I gotta know when I read it. It's like, all right, dramaturgical, write that down.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah, explain it to the folks.
So, dramaturgical is kind of how the direction and the production is going to support the text. And it's all about making sure that everything you're doing is supporting the narrative. And making sure that it's supporting, the point you're trying to make. Ooh.
Serving a purpose,
right?
And not losing the forest for the trees or losing the trees for the forest.
Either one works. I've said this before. I think in a different video. Yeah, just
Soltron said, "I've heard it say that Francis Bacon's chaplain and literary executor was William Raleigh, was related to Walter Raleigh."
Interesting. And me and Brady, we're kind of fans of, and I don't know if we're very literally, truthfully, realistically fans of fake deaths, but it's super compelling stuff. It's fun to think about, and it's given a whole new light to these Sydney studies, and whether it's real or not, it seems to have legs and open a door for us, so we're keeping that door open. And there's actual other scholars Simon Miles. He's totally a fan of the idea that Anthony Bacon is not dead in 1602, even though we attribute that 1601, 1602. That he stays alive at least till 1609. That maybe that's what the funeral elegy by W.S. or John Ford or whatever later in 1609 or 1612 is about. But that said, like, you know, we pitched it with Ferdinando Stanley. Walter Raleigh's supposed to be dead by 1622 when Bertha Merlin's, you know, maybe getting printed and William Raleigh pops on the scene and you start seeing his name everywhere. You know, Walter Raleigh's supposed to have his head chopped off by then, right?
I thought we were definitely making connections, at least between, maybe, I don't know how long Chapman lives. Wasn't that the guy who we thought that there was a lot of School of Night references maybe in the Chapman stuff? And even though I know that's sort of contentious and nebulous, as far as the School of Night, you know, actually being a real phenomenon or group or something like that.
Can we fill in Ian real quick? School of Night. What the shit is that?
I think they actually have a Wikipedia entry on it, so I can pull that up real quick because I think that'll have a.
Oh, nice.
I'm pretty sure they have a School of Night.
Shout out to the commenters. Shout out to my roommate Jamie. Shout out to his boyfriend roommate Trey. Pop it on the comments. Thanks, guys. Jamie's coming in with some Raleigh etymology. Raleigh can be spelled Raleigh or Rowley or Raleigh. Haven't seen it spelled Raleigh, Rawley. And yeah, it means deer's meadow. Okay, that's what I thought. Something like that. Which School of Night. Here we go. Yeah, let's let Wiki say it. I'll let Brady run this here.
Is a modern name for a group of men centered on Sir Walter Raleigh that was once referred to in a 1592 as the School of Atheism. The group supposedly included poets, scientists Christopher Marlowe, George Chapman, Matthew Royden, and Thomas Harriot.
Yeah, which we need to at some point do a video just on Thomas Harriot because apparently that guy may be secretly the smartest dude that ever lived.
Oh.
So, you know, we'll look into him at some point. Like everything, not everything, but all this stuff that we give to Galileo and Newton and Descartes and Leibniz and stuff.
Wait, there's no firm evidence that these men even knew each other, but we lumped them together?
Yeah.
What and why? What is happening? And like
you're starting to see, no.
I totally get. Like every time you read these articles, it's like, wait, but where did you get that logic from?
How do we know what we know? And what's crazy is that okay, yeah, what you're saying has been totally called out. And early as the 50s, people started questioning: is this School of Night thing really a thing, or is this some kind of made-up narrative that we sort of started to lump like-minded people together that Marlowe talks about some things can be interpreted atheist, and we do know that Walter Raleigh made jokes about Christianity, so, that's kind of what happens when they get associated together, and
So, because they had similar political opinions, they were lumped together in a group. That makes no sense.
It's like there's little lines in Shakespeare and Chapman that talk about this school or that school, and I think the name School of Night comes from a Shakespeare play? It's either Shakespeare... Yeah, Love's Labour's Lost, thank you.
Oh, okay. There were two other renderings of the line. One reading Suit of Night and the other a Scowl of Night.
But see, even that's what I'm fucking talking about.
We don't even know that it's School of Night. It could have been Scowl of Night.
Yeah,
And so because of that, even though we've debunked it, there's still vestigial traces of this idea in a lot of, not just mainstream, but probably a lot even more Marlovian Shakespeare authorship theory that we know that Marlowe was buddies with Raleigh, and we know that Marlowe was buddies with Chapman, and
to go back to
don't know that. It's a good guess. But.
Well, I only know go back to the last episode about De Vere and Sydney, and remember the Meliana sparrow. What's the name of it? It's not Megliano sparrow.
Oh yeah,
it's the
Meliora sparrow.
Meliora sparrow. The folk Greville.
Yes,
but it's but it literally says this. It begots this something of atheists, or this it begot something a bunch of atheists or something like that, right? Now, I think also Frances Yates also talks about in this book. She talked about this idea of melancholy and this sort of mind state to be in, to inhabit, to sort of get this particular access to a type of muse, essentially.
Yeah.
But that a whole aspect of a lot, and she was relating it to all these German painters and all this other artwork and other media in the Renaissance period, but then tracing it to eventually Shakespearean, writings and stuff like that. But one of these aspects is that you would literally be a student of literally the night, that most of the deep introspection is not going to be during the day when it's all daylight and all the mundane stuff is going on. It's like after hours. You're like really diving into the deep psyche and
you brought up
this deep contemplation.
Well,
so,
also, I mean, if this
the
is...
student at night, school of night.
And so I'm glad you brought up Yeats, because, like, what's it say on the bottom of that page?
Yeah.
So what happens is Yeats comes up with all these provocative ideas that says, hey, all these like-minded people have a lot of these like-minded ideas that surround these, like, very abstract, symbolic things like night and darkness, but also very literal things like this is when we have free time to do it. And we
I was literally about to say, because, I mean, daylight is so precious at that time for an actor when you do not have lighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you are dependent on daylight.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have it, you can't do a show today.
And, like, I guess that totally makes sense that, like, what she suggests a lot of, like, she doesn't come out and say they must be an exact school of night and they were all members and they met at so-and-so's house. She's like, there's, like, a movement of thought.
There's a reason why these little monikers have kind of come to us, and she's trying to tracing about, where that all comes from.
People have been super reductive with Yeats's ideas, and that's turned into, these guys had a little Boy Scout club called School of Night, and they'd meet at Raleigh's house, and everybody hated them because they were atheists. And it's like, this super reductive idea is a watering down of what Yeats made
and
with
Shakespeare wasn't an atheist.
Yeah.
Shakespeare is like whatever you want him to be. I always feel like, he's like Protestant, he's Catholic, he's atheist, he's universalist,
Deist, agnostic.
He's democratic. He's
Muslim.
He's imperialist.
There's at least one guy out there that has pitched that Shakespeare was an Arab person.
Really?
Yeah.
Add him to the board.
Yeah. It was an Arab dude that moved through the Ottoman Empire over into England, kind of, a way wackier version of the Florio narrative.
This reminds me of that scene in The Dark Knight where it's like the beginning of the movie and they don't know who Batman is and they got the police guys on the case and they're like, any luck yet? And they're like, it's still under investigation. It's just got Abraham Lincoln and like Bigfoot, at this point, it's like that's what we got on our Shakespeare lineup, I mean, it's kind of there are some people out there, and I think Soltron can attest to this. I haven't looked into this evidence, but there's some people that say like Francis Bacon wrote like Don Quixote and stuff like that, and it's like that's kind of a stretch for me, Like,
here's the thing: I don't believe everything,
Yeah.
But here's the thing: to me, it seems a lot like if you see Naked Gun, where the car crashes into the fireworks factory, and he's trying to disperse people away from the exploding fireworks factory. Saying, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, moving along. As fireworks are going off, people are being thrown into the air. Nothing to see here. I feel like that's really kind of, a lot of the vibe.
But yeah, so School of Night. I forgot where we were that. Oh, and just the references that were coming through, and we were talking about Raleigh, I guess.
Let me see. Oh, this is Atchison's proposal was endorsed by notable editors John Dover Wilson. That's super interesting because John Dover Wilson's like a big time important author for attribution of Henry VI. He's the first one to notice that Act 1. He's not the first one. He's the first big time scholar to notice that Act 1 is probably Thomas Nash. And I'm in the middle of an argument right now with Vet Stadium on one of our comment boards, but I continually get posed by a small minority of Oxfordians that don't like the idea of our group theory, and they for sure just want to say Shakespeare's one mind, one genius. And
I would say those people have never been to a theater before.
So true. Which may be true. I don't know. Like they can respond and put it on the comment boards. But like my problem with Oxford is Shakespeare 100% that nobody else is out there. Is that like okay, let's just look at this one play, Henry VI, Part 1. Act 1 is completely stylistically different on multiple counts, not just word choice, but line counts, like how many feminine endings, where emphases are in your metrical stresses, like all sorts of syntactical constructions. It's just different. It's written by somebody else. It's somebody different than the rest of the acts. Beyond Act 1 is a whole lot more up for debate, and people think that Shakespeare did Scene 4 of Act 2 for sure. Maybe he did the middle parts of Act 4, but 3 and 5 feel kind of different than the other two. And so people have hovered on, Henry VI is 3 writers. Some people are like, no, it's like 4 or 5. But 3 writers, and that's Nash, Shakespeare, and either Kidd, or Marlowe, or Green, or Peele.
The usual suspects.
Yeah. And of the Shakespeare Apocrypha. And so it's like, the fact that people can't even figure out if it's Kidd or Marlowe or Green or Peele means that they don't know the difference between Kidd or Marlowe or Green or Peele, and they don't. They don't know the difference, because if you read Edward II, a giant chunk of Edward II can be read in things attributed to Thomas Kidd, like Spanish Tragedy, or Arden of Faversham, or Solomon and Persetta. And so it's like, wait, maybe Edward II is actually a Kidd play, not a Marlowe play. Or maybe it's co-written together. Or maybe they're just co-influencing each other because they're supposed to live together. But it gets even worse when you go look at the troublesome reign of King John, which is given to George Peele, attributed to George Peele, which has tons of lines in common with all those plays I just named. And Henry VI. But George Peele's yet a different writer. And then, of course, like, that's not even acknowledging maybe some of the overlap in thought and style between Nash and Green and the rest of this crowd, too. And so it's like, it's this whole kind of warped mess where when you get down to the brass tacks, we don't have an exact definition of what these authors are stylistically. And so all these people trying to do stylistic research, you're going to have to actually define what it means to be Shakespeare if you want to say this section is Shakespeare or not. If you want to say, oh, no, this section is Nash, you got to define what it is. And they've done actually a pretty decent job of defining what Nash is. Like, you read this essay by Warren Cherniak, or you read a counter essay by Brian Vickers, or another one by John Dover Wilson, or McDonald B. Jackson, or any of these attribution guys. They all can pinpoint what a Nash thing is. Ironically, they can't pinpoint that Nash is Decker, even though they say the same exact things about the two guys, but I digress.
Yeah, I also just am curious. No one seems to talk or care about who's giving direction to these pieces and these works.
I'm glad it's in the Vickers essay that I didn't bring, but
because like direction is so important. Like if we
I should have totally brought the Vickers essay instead of the Cherniak essay about Henry VI, because he starts it off by comparing maybe what the theater group of writers would have looked like in comparison to what we know about the group of painters in a Renaissance painting studio.
Right.
So we know what an Italian Renaissance painting studio looked like. You would have had a head guy like Da Vinci or Michelangelo or someone like that, or maybe his best right-hand man, and they would be in charge of a project, and they would have a bunch of underlings underneath them. And so this idea of a master person running a project with a bunch of underlings, that's super sort of in vogue for a lot of Oxfordians. Oxfordians think that's the exact pattern, that Oxford's our Da Vinci character, he has a bunch of scribes, and that so we see some stylistic differences and some weird
okay, well, let's take that. But like, alright, art costs money.
Yeah. So
theaters cost money.
And
do you really feel like the person who's paying the bills doesn't have a say?
Yeah. So that's a good point. That like, if Oxford is going bankrupt paying for these, like, it makes sense that he has a say in these plays, even if he's not writing them.
Can I tell you? Can we launch into my parallel, the modern parallel of De Vere, who I think De Vere is in the.
Let's talk about that.
Because okay, so we're talking a lot about this, and Brady, this name is probably going to be completely new to you.
Okay.
But there's a man named Hal Prince. Have you ever heard of this man before?
Hal Prince?
Hal Prince.
HAL
Yeah.
Prince?
I mean, yeah. Harold Prince, right there, right at the top.
This one?
Yep. Harold Prince is one of the most important men in the history of American theater. Okay? He worked on everything from West Side Story to Sweeney Todd to Phantom of the Opera to Fiddler on the Roof to Cabaret. Cabaret was literally his idea. This man is one of the most prolific directors on Broadway. He worked with the two greatest talents who probably ever worked.
Fosse and Sondheim.
Fosse and Sondheim, right? Who are, by the way, also complete opposites of each other.
Oh, and you know, one that he's not a fan of, but some people are, Andrew Lloyd Webster as well.
Andrew Lloyd Webber as well. Really, like when you take those three, you have someone who he's worked with people who both excelled in flash and substance, and people who excelled with, more intricate works. But he was there for almost every great work in this century.
Yeah. Like, he's touched almost every important thing that came on the stage.
If you look at the two shows that both Bob Fosse did and Stephen Sondheim that are reflective of their lives, there is a character in both of those shows that is modeled off of Harold Prince. Of the two most influential, who, by the way, whose styles couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
Right? Bob Fosse didn't get Stephen Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim didn't get Bob Fosse. They were different things.
But Hal Prince is the connection between them.
Right.
It's funny that like these four movies here are definitely things I remember my mother watching a lot of when I was growing up. Like, she was big. There's like some joke from Fiddler on the Roof that we use in our family as a meme joke. I don't remember what it was, but she definitely was a fan of that. I definitely saw her watch Cabaret and Sweeney Todd and Phantom of the Opera a lot.
Yeah.
So, right.
Yeah, the film versions anyway. So.
And those are...
She's a big musical person.
Those are all different writers.
Okay, yeah, so Hal Prince, he's not a writer. Okay? No. Hal Prince is not a writer.
Producer.
He's a producer, right? But you can't talk about modern American theater, American musical theater without talking about this man's impact.
And so, like, that's been one of the things that Brady and I have been talking about with, Patrick Buckridge in our Friend or Foe video that says, hey, yeah, De Vere's in Shakespeare. You can see De Vere being referenced when you read Shakespeare's poem and plays, but that does not mean he is the person writing this. Hal Prince is the best, most obvious example of that. And not only is he an obvious example, he's a super powerful, prominent example. Because if you go watch a Stephen Sondheim play, like, let's say, one that's out right now, super successful, is Merrily We Roll Along. It's starring Harry Potter, dude.
Yeah, Daniel Radcliffe. And the original production was directed by Hal Prince.
And it's not just that. Like, the main character, Frank, is so clearly based on Hal Prince.
Is based off of Hal Prince.
If you are just watching this play and trying to read biography, you're going to come out with the idea that this play is being written by Hal Prince. That this isn't about Stephen Sondheim. This is about Hal Prince. You can say the same thing of several Sondheim plays. You can say that of several Bob Fosse plays. And if you end up don't have, a good handle on the air and you're just hundreds of years later going back and watching renditions of these plays, you're going to see Hal Prince as this common thread, and then all of a sudden you're going to tell yourself, Hal Prince wrote all these plays, even though they're all stylistically different. There's this through line that you can see through all of them, and it's Hal Prince doing all of it. And it's like, and ironic the name Prince.
So then years later they're going to say, well, everything Sondheim did also was done by Hal Prince.
Yeah.
No. Hal Prince worked with Sondheim for about half of his career. Ironically, the show about their relationship was the straw that broke the camel's back. They never worked with each other ever again after having a flop about their relationship.
Which is the one that's now starring Harry Potter.
Yeah, it is now the biggest
it was a huge
success.
Flop in, 70s or 80s?
80s. It's the biggest. It ran 16 performances. It was 2 weeks.
Super, super flop. Never came out again. They parted ways. Never worked with each other ever again.
But they're redoing it right now.
And it's making $2 million a week.
Oh shoot! Dang. Shout out to our Harry Potter. Shout out to our Butterbeer episode, Patreon exclusive video as we make Butterbeer and
There you go.
chug it.
And also, just what a Shakespearean name, Harold or Hal Prince. Like Prince Hal is like the star of Henry IV and Henry V and
Prince Ham. Well, no.
See, and they call him. They often call Sondheim the Bard of Broadway, and he's definitely the Prince of Broadway. They call him.
Yeah.
There's a thing, but and we got into him. Is his whole thing is Brechtian theater.
Okay.
So theater that reminds you you're watching theater.
Okay, which is totally a trope that's in Shakespeare.
Someone said, "I'm thinking this podcast would take off if you fellas wore Elizabethan garb."
I've been like
the Phillies,
I so desperately want to get several Renaissance fair outfits. Like next time Brady and I go back to the Ren Fair, I'm gonna get my buddy Chris, who works at several Ren fairs, to point me out. Let me go find a tailor. I will spend the extra cash to get me one of these really awesome Philip Sidney type outfits, so that I can have the thing, and I don't know, some kind of rapier type. It would be awesome. So I totally agree. Let's see. So, could any of these Renaissance writers be kind of Fernando Pessoa? Soltron's got all the greatest questions. He wrote under various names, supposedly using a different style for each. So, that mirrors what Bob Prechter says about Oxford as Shakespeare. That Oxford is definitely Shakespeare. That's unquestionable for Oxfordians. But that maybe before, during, or after, he's also writing as Thomas Nash, which is a whole different style. You gotta be kind of ridiculous and biting to be Nash. But then when he wants to write on a different style, he writes as Green, which I don't really buy that argument. I don't think Green and Nash are the same writer. They're two ideologically similar, but yet stylistically dissimilar. I feel like Green's a little clunkier. I feel like Green's much more worried about meter and that sort of thing. What I think is happening is that Green is the early version of Henry Chettle, and I think that Nash is the early version of Thomas Dekker. There's, going to be almost a literal perfect continuum between Green becoming Chettle and Nash becoming Dekker. I think there's other names that we can do that with that I haven't totally, checked into as well, but, I think Lodge becomes Drayton. I think that maybe there's reason to look at maybe Peel becoming Chapman, maybe some other names like that. I don't know. I still don't know what to do with Marlowe, Kidd, or Lily. I really don't. Lily, apparently, this is a fun fact that I learned. Lily is the only writer, the only at least well-known famous writer, that did not ever collaborate. John Lilly never collaborated, just wrote by himself supposedly, which already I'm like, nah, that's a lie. That's bullshit.
I'm sorry. I don't think there's theater without collaboration.
Yeah. And John Lilly, by the way, is this guy that's supposed to be the greatest thing in the 80s. He totally revolutionizes style, and he comes up with his own style that's called euphuism, which is to be ornately flowery and beautiful, and it's what we think when we think of Romeo and Juliet, this pure poetry, early Shakespeare, right? His poems and that kind of thing. Lilly invents that, and he is the height of it. He's also maybe invents the English novel, and then in 1590 quits writing forever. No explanation. The end.
That's not satisfying.
It's weird, right? It's I don't understand.
Someone said we have to include the tights.
No.
Join our Patreon and I'll wear tights. You can't even see our legs below this desk right now, but
oh yeah. Well, I'm already wearing tights.
He showed up in tights.
I'm not. But here, let me see. I think that's it. Oh, also, last but not least, I've started before I even touched John Oldcastle. I started reading Chettle's Hoffman's Tragedy, which comes out the same year as Hamlet, and it's supposed to be the rival play to Hamlet. Hamlet's happening over with the Kingsmen over at their Globe. Chettle is doing this over at the Rose with the Admiral's men. And it's also a guy getting revenge for his father being killed. This one's way more fun than Hamlet. It's not as near as good a play. It's crap compared to Hamlet. It's absolute dog crap. But way more fun. Like, dude, by scene 3 or 4, like, the main character who's named Hoffman, which is called Hoffman's Tragedy, he has killed, like, 4 or 5 guys. Like, and he's, like, guys, this is just the start. Like, hold on to your butts. Like, bodies are going to start hitting the floor. And, he's doing this to a bunch of rich people, and he's not a rich dude. He's just some nobody whose nobody dad got killed by a bunch of rich German, Emperor Duke type dudes. And he's like, no, screw everybody. Everybody's going to die now. And I'm going to manipulate everybody into dying. It's like, it's got this really great Jew of Malta, Richard III type story structure, but the language isn't all there. And the language is much more akin to Tamerlane. You get that rompy, stompy, but like I said, this is why I think Green and Chettle is the same hand. In fact, if you guys didn't know this, Green's Groatsworth's Wit, the document that tells us Shakespeare's Shakespeare, the first one that says, the upstart crow who thinks he's the best shake scene in our country, that's supposedly Robert Greene. It's called Green's Groatsworth's Wit, right? Well, if you didn't know this, apparently a lot of people think that Henry Chettle wrote that. Because stylistically it reads just like Henry Chettle. It's hard to deny. It's like, wow, this reads just like Henry Chettle. But it's got Green's name on it. And, Green does kind of write like that too. So, but, like, if you think that that's crazy, most people are just wrong. Well, apparently, the year that got printed, Green Groatsworth's Wit, Chettle had to put out another pamphlet called Kind Heart's Dream, where he explains, guys, quit blaming me for writing that pamphlet. I didn't write Green Groatsworth's Wit. I promise you I didn't. So literally, at that time, people thought that Chettle wrote Green's Groatsworth's Wit. He had to come out and say, no, that's not me. That's Robert Greene, who pretty much dies, like, right after that.
What does he die of again? Is he only done the fish poisoning? Or is
fish wine poisoning.
Yeah. Fish wine poisoning. That happens a lot. I had a friend that happened to.
Ian's lived in Europe, so like I got him to confirm or deny that. He's lived in France.
I've seen it. It's dangerous, especially in the wintertime.
He's joking, guys. Like, that's never happened. Like, please don't believe that story. That's all you guys out there that think Shakespeare's Shakespeare. That's fine. We won't go into that argument. But who the heck is Robert Greene? Because like Robert Greene's not Robert Greene. Oh, thank you for letting us know the double reverb.
Because at one point, I definitely hope if we can record part of this to send back, because Chance and I have been working on a video that I would love to get your input on it, maybe.
Yeah, so he's been working on a script for a video essay that he was going to do, and he kind of roped me into it, like turned into like a co-essay interview, and because he's writing it about Company, which is a very famous musical that is like Stephen Sondheim's first like successful solo endeavor, and a lot of people think.
Scoot a little closer.
Oh, my bad. There we go. A lot of people think that Stephen Sondheim's best musical play is called Company. And so Ian wanted to get like my input on it, because it's one of the few that he showed me that I've been like, yeah, dude, that didn't make my eyes bleed. Like, I don't want to hurt myself after watching that.
Which, by the way, I did bring a copy. So, do you know, Brady? Do you know anything about Stephen Sondheim?
Yeah, he's only what Chance had kind of debriefed me on, that he's the guy who did The Lion King. Did he write The Lion King?
Not at all.
Oh no, that's
no.
Judy Taymor. Okay.
I'm
more losing.
It's fine. Like, okay, let me put it this way. What would you think about when you think about a musical?
What would I think about?
Like, be as harsh and critical as you want.
So like, I remember when I was a kid, for some reason, I really enjoyed Singing in the Rain, and so this is just my intro to like musicals. And I also, I thought there was maybe one other one, but I can't think of it. But yeah, Singing in the Rain, I particularly liked for whatever reason.
Yeah, sure.
And then the only musical that I've actually seen in person was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Okay,
it was maybe 2 years ago. My grandmother-in-law got my daughter tickets to Frozen. So we went and saw it like downtown or whatever.
Oh, God.
And
Bless your heart.
They do all the same stuff. What I will say is that I did take notice that there was a lot of like crazy stage effects.
Right, yeah. I mean, Disney shows are theme rights, right?
Okay.
Like in the same way that like a Marvel movie has great special effects.
Or The Tempest.
Right, like, you know, okay, but like I'm guessing you don't typically like musicals. Give you a chance.
I'm not gonna go out of my way to go watch one or whatever, right? Yeah, I've never watched like Cats or Rent or anything.
Have you ever seen a musical where you're like, man, that really made me think about my existential existence and how I kind of navigate the world around me? Have you ever thought there's a musical out there about like going over and getting too high when you were trying to talk about your new relationship and screwing it all up?
No, not of that caliber, I'd say. And like I said, I mentioned that my mom had kind of watched a lot of musicals growing up, so she watched a lot of Chicago. She probably watched that like 100 times, and so I it's like
Phantom of the Opera, really big.
Phantom of the Opera. She watched.
There's one that you did mention that actually was written by Stephen Sondheim.
Was it Cabaret?
No.
Or was it Fiddler on the Roof?
No.
What was the one that I mentioned?
Sweeney Todd.
Okay. Yeah. She did watch that one with she watched the movie version with Helena Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp.
Yeah. I you know what? Like here's the thing. Most movie adaptations are absolute train wrecks. Oh, Kiss Me Kate? Yes! I have been trying to get him to watch Kiss Me Kate for the longest time.
He showed me several clips, and I'm super down to watch it. I just told him back in the day, I was like, no, I gotta reread Taming, and I reread Taming.
Because Kiss Me Kate happens during a production of Taming of the Shrew.
Okay.
So you get scenes from Taming of the Shrew that's like this musical version of Taming of the Shrew, of which, by the way, there's one song that a girl says she wants any Tom, Harry, or Dick. Just give her a dick. A dick. Give me dick. Like, it's... Give me a hairy dick. Give me a hairy dick. Like... For a show in the 50s, it's fantastic.
50,
it's super early. It's
right on the back of Singing in the Rain too. Like or right on the front of it's like right same time.
So it's really kind of a cool piece. I really love singing Kiss Me Kate, and a lot of modern reinterpretations have had amazing dancing. But so Sondheim wrote Sweeney Todd. I have a love-hate relationship, honestly, with Sweeney Todd because I feel like it doesn't deserve to be the one Sondheim musical that everyone talks about. I feel like the same way that you talk about Romeo and Juliet is like the way I feel about Sweeney Todd. Like, yes, it's amazing. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Sure. I think, like, even Sondheim specifically musically is the most creative he ever is.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's his best work. Yeah. And it doesn't deserve to be his most seen piece.
Yeah. It's like become like everybody knows Sweeney Todd, and then like if you're a big Sondheim fan, you check out the others.
Yeah, and it's also because Sondheim is so known for having shows that are really introspective.
Yeah.
And this is a show that, it's about a man who murders people and then they cut them up and put them in pies. It's pretty sensational.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, like, I think a lot of the power of Sondheim is him taking relatable, simple moments and making them sing.
Yeah.
In a way that other people just don't in this industry. So, anyway, Yeah, a lot of people, I think, would think of things that are a little more big, high dance numbers singing in the rain, right? You think of these tap dance numbers. Yeah. Company has none of this. Company is not about doing a big song and dance. It is about, it's kind of just a show about, in Sondheim's words, a man on his 35th birthday, I will read exactly, a man on his 31st birthday, a man with no emotional commitments who reassesses his life on his 35th birthday by reviewing his relationships with his married acquaintances and girlfriends. That is the entire plot.
As Ian said it to me the other day, and the version that I've seen, you don't have to treat it as this. You can watch it like it's a montage of several days or something, but what it actually is like this dude walks into a surprise birthday party, or if you see the current version, they've flipped it into a girl, which...
Yeah, so Bobby is now a girl. Bobby...
The main character.
Yeah, instead of Robert, now it's Bobby with an I-E.
Which we used to coach a girl named Bobby, shout out. And so, yeah, Bobby comes home, surprise birthday, and like in that instant kind of has this big kind of long flashback of all the chicks that he used to date, or all the dudes that she used to date, if you're watching.
And all the pressure that they've received from the married couples in their lives.
But it's not just a flashback, it's like in the mix of the flashback, it'll go back to the current birthday party, and all the people at the birthday party are like you. They're married. They're all couples. And so it's like Bobby and then all these couples. So all these couples are like, yo, Bobby, like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you're 35. Like, do you want to get married or not? And like, Bobby, I don't know.
And that's the whole plot. And it's non-linear. And again, this is another quote from him. It says, the show takes place not over a period of time, but in an instant in Robert's mind. Perhaps on a psychiatrist's couch, perhaps on the moment where he comes into his apartment on the 35th birthday, and the framework is a surrealist party for him. And what's cool is different productions frame it different. So it can be framed like he's on a psychiatrist's couch. It can be framed like the new version. It is framed in that moment where she comes into her apartment, sets down her keys, and is getting settled, and has sat through her phone and listened to her messages, read her texts, and just decides and it kind of, that experience broke her a little bit. So you're going through kind of the thought process in her head. So, this is a very
nuanced, subtle, but heady sort of discussion, and like,
it's got that multiplicity rooting, which we kind of talk about with Shakespeare. It's like, do we want to be more, we can kind of lean into this certain aspect or this like undertone that, or that they've kind of got going on, or we can kind of bring it this way and kind of have this sort of attitude, or we can throw it out the window and have it be comedic somehow.
And the version I showed Chance, which I think is like, I love this new version. I think the new version adds new subtext. And I almost wish that the previous director could take, like, you could combine the two versions into one mutant version, but that is not, like...
It's kind of how we were talking about Macbeth in our Macbeth video.
Right.
I wish you could take aspects of each of these.
They're still close.
Because, like, so many of it works, but essentially, in this one production, it's stripped down. Everyone wears black.
Oh, really?
There's no set. And... there's no orchestra. So...
It's all like a cappella or something? Or?
No, each of the actors has an instrument that they will use to accompany in the piece. And this allows for some really freaking cool stuff. So, for instance, if a man is singing a song about, what it's like to be married, okay? And then he says something that makes him think of his wife. Well, his wife can accompany him on the flute during that moment when that ping of thinking about his wife flutters into his head. And the ability to use the instruments, and it also does this cool metaphor that everyone plays an instrument except for Bobby. Because Bobby is the only person who hasn't learned to communicate with the rest of the world. Bobby's the only person...
Or if he has, he refuses to do so, or give evidence that he's learned to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, part of the reason why we wanted to do a video is... So, my boyfriend, the other half of this group, we love musicals, right? He hated this. Like, and he's seen Company before. He wasn't a fan of Company before. He was really hoping that this new version would, like...
Give new life.
And you know what? He did say, like, granted, this production is great. Like, he came out of it saying, like, the physical production of this was cool. That's not my problem. I'm just not a fan of Company.
Like, yeah, just the whole premise, the whole execution of that particular story or whatever.
Well, it's a musical about a guy who goes and has dinner with some friends.
Uh-huh.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no plot, there's no action.
Not a lot of room for spectacle or sort of, it's going to be a lot of, like, you probably listening and having to, like, you know, sort of engage with the text or the sort of...
Yeah, and, like, you guys that are followers of Ian's channel already, because Ian's going to take this and post this on his channel, I presume, you guys that are y'all already know Trey and Ian, but, like, Trey's a little younger than the three of us. Ian and I are the same age. Brady's a year or two. He's exactly a year younger than me. He's a year and a half younger than Ian. He was 2 grades below us. He's same age as my brother, but Trey's significantly younger than us, such that Trey's considered, he's, you know, millennial Zoomer edge. Like, he could be considered a Zoomer or a millennial.
Yeah.
And so, like, Trey, like, often, like, has this, like, more Zoomer-like perspective, but I don't want to pigeonhole Trey, because Trey is also, like, oddly, incredibly old school. What's his favorite musicals?
It's all the old Golden Age stuff. But at the same time, he says, well...
Kiss Me Kate.
Yeah, he loves Kiss Me Kate. He's a huge Kiss Me Kate fan.
And, by the way, Trey's also super, like... we'll get into the Fleetwood Mac argument in a second, because Ian's, like... favorite band ever is Fleetwood Mac with Lindsey Buckingham and Christy McVie and that crowd, the Rumors album and stuff. Trey, me and my roommate Jamie have secretly converted him to being a Peter Green fan.
Ooh.
So yeah, just classicism shout out for Trey. But continue, my bad.
Where were we?
Trey just doesn't like this play. He just doesn't.
And I think it came to a point where he said, I think his view, his view was, he doesn't feel someone pressuring for him to get married.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because he's younger, but also I think it's generational.
Yeah, like, some of these society pressures that were influencing the play Company, like, just aren't present.
And I think that's also why they had to make her a girl.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
that still is
a 35-year-old male saying, why are you pressuring him into getting married? But
you know, guys, I'm almost 35 and I'm still not married. I don't need to sing a song to explain myself. I'm fine, and, like, I'm kind of on the same page as Trey, though. This is the best musical that Ian has showed me. This is the best Broadway. Like, my favorite all-time musical is
still singing it, right?
My favorite all-time musical is Singing in the Rain's great. Gene Kelly's the bomb diggity. But my favorite musical ever, which I think Brady's also a fan, it's the Goofy movie, man.
Oh, my God.
The Goofy movie is the best musical ever.
Okay, hey, not even in a cap. Goofy movie has incredible musical theater structure.
Yep.
It understands what a good piece of musical theater needs to be.
Yeah.
Like, I
every song's a banger. Like, the visuals...
Not only that, but the first song operates as both a world opener and an I Want song.
Which is, you know, that's like Beauty and the Beast level, which was nominated for a Best Picture award.
Yeah, no, like, literally that's like the bell from the opening of Beauty and the Beast.
Ooh, Robin Hood. Okay.
Yeah.
What's that? Which Robin Hood? Men in Tights?
Or are you talking about the ones with the foxes?
The
No,
old Disney one.
the old Disney one. That's like, you're right. That's totally, yeah. Roger Miller. Roger Miller does the music. Yes, that was actually one of me and my brother's favorite Disney IPs as well. Like, I'm a huge fan.
But yeah, no, I think Sideways has a video about how like you can divine perfect musical theater structure from the Goofy movie.
Okay.
So like, I honestly, like, you're not.
I'm a natural, guys.
See, I feel like Goofy movie you couldn't say it's a musical if it's not quite.
But why?
Music matters.
That's
I feel like it's not the same sort of like, I don't know. It's not the same sort of like, you know.
Why? Because it's animated. Because this is taken to the internet.
It's like the way, because it's not like, I don't know. It's not like
The ratio of
it's,
spoken to singing.
Yeah, or it's also sort of like when it is like in one point it's Max. It's not really Max singing. It's sort of like him doing.
Okay. So when he's
right?
no, I get you.
And there are like
so there's
musical numbers, but it's
diegetic and non-diegetic is what you're getting at,
maybe.
right? So like, and I'm gonna flip them, but basically, whether you're performing, is it an actor who is performing music in like on stage, right? That's diegetic, right?
Yes.
I'm just gonna like, I don't have internet.
You're talking about the Robin Hood cartoon one. The
Yeah,
Disney
so
one.
there's diegetic and non-diegetic. So there's music that happens within the context. So think a band is playing on a stage. And then there's non-diegetic,
Radio playing in the background.
which is I have decided, Belle and Beauty and the Beast, who is now singing to the people in the town.
Yes.
And there's both in the Goofy movie.
Yeah, right.
And so, like, that's why I would say when you have it where the plot is being conveyed by music and you can pull out the song, you can't pull out the song and the piece still work, it's musical theater. So, like, if you could pull out that musical number and the movie still works, it's not musical theater. And I would argue you cannot pull the music out of a Goofy movie and it still work.
He's right. Like,
Because one of them is, but
like when they're singing on the highway, like you need
that's
that song.
that's the only song. Because the other two, once again, he's doing like a miming to the song. He's not actually singing it.
You're right, but
and then at the very end of the movie, he's
when they're on the river too. When they're on the river.
Oh, I guess they do kind of
Yeah, I'm telling you, man.
Gotcha.
Storytelling through music, man. It's a hell of a thing.
He's right. He's
okay,
right, folks.
So I want to talk. So yes, Goofy movie, great. But let's talk about like why.
Thank you for indulging that digression.
No, 100%. But I want to talk about like why this is one of the best pieces of like not even just musical theater, of modern theater around, right? And why some people think this is boring as hell.
Like Trey.
Yeah.
And or my roommate Jamie. Like I don't know if Jamie's still on here, but yeah, Jamie. I'm good for now.
I'll take it. Oh, it's tequila.
You will be shocked.
Okay.
It's
So
Thanks, Mom.
Sondheim first broke onto the stage. Let me give a little background. Since
My mom's actually on the stream. Oh my god.
hey, hi sunshine.
Yes. So Sondheim actually started with West Side Story. He did just the lyrics of West Side Story. Okay, he was a new kid on the block, wasn't allowed to do music and lyrics. All he wanted to do was music and lyrics. He did a couple shows where he did just lyrics. And eventually, his first show where he did both was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. Okay. He will say, though, the first show where he found his voice was Company. Okay? And according to him, the reason why Company works was it was his first attempt, and I love this line, at evening-length irony. Evening-length irony.
It sounds really cool, and it's like, okay, cool. Wait, what does that mean? Let's unpack that.
Yeah, okay. So, first of all, he said, let's talk about Fiddler on the Roof, because Fiddler on the Roof had come before, and it had definitely had moments. Cabaret had moments of irony. But every moment of Company is infused with irony. Okay? And we kind of were sitting here, and he's like, well, what is exactly did Sondheim mean when he said irony?
It sounds cool and smart, but like, what do we mean? What do we mean irony? Do we just mean like, like metaphors or like a cynical outlook? Like, what does he mean? Evening length irony, and at some point, like this goes into a little bit of musical theater theory that like Sondheim's version of irony probably can't be done if he's trying to do Shakespeare, because Sondheim's irony comes out of juxtaposing lyrics with music.
So we were kind of confused, and he wrote these two books, Finishing the Hat and Look, I Made a Hat. And it's probably weird things, but if you're a Sondheim fan, it makes sense. I won't digress immediately. But essentially, in his second volume, which he talked about this irony in the first one, in his list of corrections, he was so helpful as we were arguing about this. He was so helpful to add, irony is a form of subtext. So it's about subtext, y'all. Company is a show that is entirely subtextual.
Yeah.
The meaning cannot be derived from the text of the show. If you did a cold reading of the Sondheim lyrics...
Yeah, where's the lyric book?
Yeah, right here. Do you want the lyrics for the show, or did you?
Yeah, just hand me the company.
Oh yeah. If you did a cold reading of the lyrics,
like if we're reading the script like we read a Shakespeare play,
it would not hit. It would give. Not only would it not hit,
it'd be obnoxious.
Not only would it be obnoxious, it would mean something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It literally wouldn't mean the same thing if it isn't performed live on stage. And if it isn't performed with the music. And so, like, I kind of want to get to this in that... So there's this song called Sorry Grateful.
Okay.
And I think it's one of the most beautiful love songs that has ever been written. But, like... Listen to these lyrics and tell me what you think. And this is, by the way, let me set up the song a little bit. Bobby has just been pressured all night to get married by this couple who have been so trying to one-up each other all night. It has gone from verbal insults to a physical confrontation.
Okay.
And as Bobby's about to leave, he says, well... Actually, do you ever regret getting married? And the friend responds, you're always sorry. Or he says, are you sorry? Ever get sorry that you're getting married?
He reads these lyrics to me and I'm like, this means nothing to me. It never will mean anything to me. You can actually have a reaction to this, so I'm interested.
Okay.
You're always sorry. You're always grateful. You hold her thinking, I'm not alone. You're still alone. You don't live for her. You do live with her. You're scared she'll drift away. And you're scared she'll stay. Things get better. Good things get better. Bad get worse. Wait, I meant that in reverse. So based on that, Brady, what do you think he feels of marriage?
So that was the one who was responding, the actual married person.
Right? Yeah, that's what the married person says about marriage.
Yeah, this is me being like,
He said you'll always be sorry, you'll always be grateful. You hold her and you think, I'm not alone, but you're still alone. You don't live for her, you do live with her. You're scared she'll drift away. And you're scared she'll stay.
Yeah, I get the sense that he's not, in some way he's not particularly fond of his marriage is kind of how I would get at.
Right.
So that's what I would take.
You would think
of
this
on the surface anyway.
Right. You would think this is a song of a man who is deeply unhappy.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a sort of sarcastic tone when you're kind of reading it, maybe, or something like that. It's like, You'll always be sorry, and you know.
Can we play like a second of it? I know like we have issues with music, but can we play like just enough to hear the tune of that? There's a great one. Stephen Colbert famously also performed this song once on Broadway.
Shout out Uncle Steve. Not my uncle, but you know. That's what I said.
Sorry, Grateful.
Back when he was funny.
All right, so I'll try to pull one up here.
Right there.
This one?
Yeah, that works.
Is it going to be starting off from the top?
Yeah.
Shout out. I won't come back down from this cloud.
You can kind of...
Yeah, Neil Patrick Harris. This was the star-studded performance.
Right, with Neil Patrick Harris's Bobby. Yeah, no worries. Because it's just such a difference.
I had you there.
I had you there.
I'd say it was a draw.
Let me do this.
Wow. Look at the time. I really gotta go.
Oh.
Wow. Listen, I had a great time.
So did we.
So great to see you. Are you sure you don't want to stay for a nightcap? Right. I mean, no. I mean, will I see you guys soon?
Don't answer that, Harry. He gets no more questions, that sneaky Pete.
So I'm going to talk over it so we just don't get demonetized. But, see, you can already see the conflict between these two people. They were in a physical confrontation.
I'll turn out the lights.
No, I will. I always do.
And of course,
No,
irony
you don't.
that they are in this confrontation, but they want to keep it going by keeping him there. Confrontation ends
See,
as soon as
and-
Bobby goes away.
He just undercuts her as she's leaving. And what does she say to him? I love you. And also, this whole scene, he's saying, I'm not drinking, I'm giving up being an alcoholic. And
You ever sorry you got married? You're always sorry. You're always grateful. You're always wondering what might have been. Then she walks in. And still you're sorry. And still you're grateful. And
Okay.
still you wonder. And still
so
you
does that make you feel different about what the song is saying?
Yeah, he's trying to be. Now he's trying. It comes off as like he's trying to be realistic about
Incredibly
the
honest
situation.
and
Yeah,
realistic.
incredibly. Yeah, just
Right.
very
Which is,
frank
like-
and sort of like
Literally the exact opposite of what you were like. You're like, yeah, it's got a sarcastic tone.
Yeah,
You're
right.
like, this guy
right.
fucking hates his wife. And it's like, no, like, he doesn't hate his wife. He just realizes the totality of the situation.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is so powerful about Company is the text is less important than the subtext, right? Like, we can talk about those lyrics all day, but it's about how that music also makes you feel and how the music makes you feel contradicts
Yeah.
the actual text.
And I'm going to tie it in because Ian's made me watch. Not made me. We watched Sunday at the Park with George today, which is another Stephen Sondheim play. We watched the Mandy Patinkin version, the original from 1986. Sunday at the Park with George is about the painter George Seurat painting his famous painting. If you've ever seen Ferris Bueller, it's the painting that Cameron's staring at the museum and he gets caught in a trance. It's all the little dots that make the people standing in front of the pond. You know what I'm talking about? The lady with the big dress.
You know
and they're all
Ferris Bueller, where they go, where,
Dude,
like...
I've never seen that movie.
Oh, dude,
I've
come
almost at this
on.
point. I think I'm almost like it's like a badge of honor that I'm trying to like avoid it at this
Oh,
point.
dude.
Like,
No,
You're missing out, dude.
it's-
Like,
it's-
if
it's
you
a
don't
good
stop
movie.
and smell the roses once
I
in
don't
a
know.
while.
I think.
That's a
but
quote.
honestly, I
Stick
loved
to my
it.
guns
We,
here.
we could pivot to that for a second because one of the big criticisms of Sondheim is that he is seen as cold. Which you could see in those lyrics. They seem cold. But is that cold or is that honesty? And I think that's something... Okay, so
Seurat's fan.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we saw Sunday in the Park with George, which is
just Sunday at the Park with George is kind of all about emergent properties in art that like George Seurat's way of painting is all about putting like literally pixels of dots, which like super prescient. He kind of predicted how our computer screens and TV screens would work, but he didn't color this dress purple. He colored it with a bunch of red and blue dots, and he knew that if he put dots in certain places, it would make some look more purple and some less purple. And it's so big, and you stand far away enough that you get this emergent purple.
Or that if you put...
There's not actually purple on the painting.
Or if you put contradicting colors in a certain color, it'll make it pop more.
Yeah.
So put reds in your greens will make your greens greener. Even though, because they're the opposite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this green grass is filled with a bunch of red dots. And it's like, wait, what? But Sondheim like recognized that. He's like, dude, that's what I do with these musicals is I'm taking different dots, the lyrics and the music, and I'm making an emergent color come out of it through juxtaposing them to each other. And so it's like, it's this cool emergent thing that this has been Ian's argument to me the whole time when I keep saying, dude, Shakespeare, Sondheim, and then... the rest of the musical theater down here, and he's like, okay, yeah, dude, Shakespeare's language here. If we're talking about language only, sure. Language, Sondheim, everybody else, sure. But, like, if we're talking about the overall artistic value, like, take Sondheim up a little more, because he's getting all this extra meaning from the craft itself that you can't get in Shakespeare.
You can't. It's just... And you can't do it in movies. That's something that movies have struggled with.
Yeah.
I think that's why, for instance, I think musicals are a better fit for adaptation for novels than movies.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah.
Because in a novel, from the point of view of the author, you can express how they're thinking, how they're feeling, all of that. That can be done in a novel. You got narration that you could maybe do,
It ties into our whole conversation in the Macbeth video about voiceover, that, like, there's this weird inferiority complex about how to take these internal thoughts and, filmically portray them. We got to do voiceover all of a sudden, and then, so it's like, Ian's saying here that, like, dude, you don't have to do weird voiceover montagey things.
In a musical, you can turn to the stage and tell the audience how you feel. And that's a song.
Yeah. And it's a totally conceivable, allowable moment that, like, yeah, this is how this organically happens. And to us, like, now with our, filmic notions in the 21st century, it seems like almost an affront. Like, dude, why is this guy talking to me? But that's why I brought up Beowulf at the start. That, like, that's actually how storytelling started. Is somebody turning to a group and start talking because we were talking before we were writing.
Yeah.
Now to Brady and my argument that, like, we were talking before we were writing, but now that we can write, like, this is such a powerful tool that, like, Brady and I are a little less interested in this public presentation thing, but Ian keeps pulling me back in and saying, like, dude, look, Shakespeare's not just writing for this stuff to get printed. This stuff is being performed over and over and over. This stuff is being performed for public reasons. If me and Brady are sitting here pitching our propaganda stuff, how can we possibly discount it being this performative thing for a giant public?
I mean, yeah, even to kind of go back to that theater of the world thing where, like, that's kind of the half the magic-y stuff is you get all these, like, pentagrams and stuff, and you put all the people in there, and then you're literally eliciting emotional, sort of like intellectual, literally stimuli from them watching the actors on the globe.
Yeah.
Like, literally that sort of macro micro concept again or whatever. But yeah, exactly. We can't divorce. The point of, like, these are plays and they're not novels. I'm pretty sure that those have a different place in a different context. Or whatever, right. So yeah, interesting. Definitely super important concept to be aware of at all time, and how to factor in all that sort of, like, extra history of, like, getting those actors back in the scene with, involved with the sort of project, or, like the Indigo Jones people and all the spectacle stuff. It's all to be considered still, or whatever.
Yeah.
Although we've been kind of pitching, like, hey, some of this Shakespeare stuff that has all the really big line zingers, that's sort of not for the spectacle stage. It is sort of about, you got to just pay attention to what they're saying or whatever.
Yeah.
Although there's maybe contrasting, sort of like orator, because obviously this company play, there is a lot of like pay attention to the words and obviously the irony between the music and the lines being spoken or whatever. So yeah, I feel like this is going to be more in line with that earlier Shakespeare that we're talking about, not the Inigo Jones with the look at all this crazy stuff we can do and all these.
But that's not to say that someone who wrote Company, which is a very small show that has no plot about friends talking about marriage, isn't the same man who wrote Sweeney Todd or Into the Woods, which are complex stories with
Big
lots,
spectacle.
with lots of big moving parts, and
Or
so
it's not to say that this small thing couldn't get reworked into something bigger. Like
if anything, the production I saw was trying to do that, right? So this was a production that before, blank room, no set, no costumes. They have, if you look even in the book, you could probably bring up some images of the Company set from the latest revival, but it was neon. It was bright. They put special effects in Company. Would I have ever been someone who was like, the show that's going to have some of the best special effects I've seen this year? It was Company. No, that was not something I thought I would say. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's because a lot of people do perform this to let the material itself shine.
Right.
But it's one of those things where, that is the power of good theater and good literature, which a lot of people who compare Sondheim, even Mandy Patinkin in the commentary for Sunday in the Park with George, was talking about the specificity that in which Sondheim writes, and he goes, I don't mean to embarrass you. He goes, but whenever I talk about you in public, I talk about you, I talk about Shakespeare, and what makes the great works the great works. And he goes, there's two things. One's the specificity. That someone is writing something so specific that it's universal and it reaches and connects with so many people.
Because it feels like a real human moment.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it keeps getting...
Our camera.
Oh. Well, we can keep talking.
Yeah. You guys can still hear
I
it.
can actually switch it out real quick.
We gotta change our camera batteries, but we're still on with you.
But yeah, it's a story that's so universal that it keeps getting told over and over and over.
Yeah.
And then the other thing he said is, I think there's something unintentional in great works.
Unintentional?
Unintentional. That the artist is working at such a level that...
They can flex without being deliberate.
Yeah, it's subconscious.
Yeah.
There's something that they're writing about that even them could not put their finger on.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because to me, like, that's what I think a lot of these Shakespeare authorship question is getting at, and all these people that want to say Shakespeare's one writer or the main writer, is that ultimately, yeah, they want to try to be able to say, like, who is it behind this? Like, what is it behind this that's making this subtext so powerful? And, like, Sondheim is able to flex this amount of subtext because he's reading tons of Shakespeare. Because he's hanging out with Hammerstein. He's, like, he's working with some of the greats, and he's constantly inundated in it. And so that's where I like to really be vocal about my Shakespeare doubt, is that, look, you Stratfordians out there, like, I totally appreciate the elitism argument for the Shakespeare doubt. Like, yes, I don't like the idea that Shakespeare had to be a rich guy to be talented. I don't like the idea that Shakespeare had to be a noble guy to be talented.
No.
But what I don't like is the idea that somebody that doesn't have access to a giant amount of books, somebody that didn't grow up with theater, is able to flex subconsciously at the level that Shakespeare is.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times there's a dog whistle on, we can't talk about this because that might.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not helpful. And I think that, especially with how nebulous attribution is in the first case, the fact that no one has the right to say anything with any certainty.
No. Yeah,
about the authorship question.
You're absolutely right. We need to change the whole rhetoric.
Oxfordians included.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everybody, that's why Brady and I are incredibly cautious and agnostic about making claims. We like throwing claims out there, but we'll definitely qualify those claims and say, look, we're not certain.
I'll quickly retreat from any claim that I say. This is mine. Oh, it's my bad.
Oops, wait, wrong claim.
Yeah. Wait, this whole podcast we just made about, we didn't even know who wrote it.
Yeah,
the last one we just did.
On that note, let's talk about that elephant in the room. I will link this back to the other video, but yeah, our Meliora Sparrow video, our Oxford and Sydney, our buddies riding together video. I didn't do my homework enough for that video.
We got Apokalupsis. No, we got Nullius and Verbud.
Yeah, we Nullius and Verbud ourselves. That I thought I had cracked the code because I found this poem that was listed as a De Vere poem by Alexander Grossart, who's, the guy that's attributed most of the stuff that we attribute. He's the guy that bound up all the stuff that we have printed. He said, oh, this is De Vere, so who am I to question it? I just read it and said, hey, this is a deep cut De Vere poem that nobody's looking at, and it's got all these Philip Sidney references. We finally have our connection. But it turns out it's not an Edward De Vere poem. It's a Fulk Greville poem. And mixed feelings. On the one hand, we don't have our connection between De Vere and Sidney, and that makes me so sad. But on the other hand, this is fantastic news, because this means my reading was kind of correct. All the Philip Sidney spots, yeah, that's totally Philip Sidney. Fulk Greville would totally be writing that. Anything that we said, hey, that's maybe Dyer, we're probably right about that. But here's where it gets hairy, is that our whole thing we were talking about, Oxford's the one that's Thomas Watson, because the Watson poem looks so similar to Melia Sparrow. Well, that means Oxford's not Watson and Fulk Greville's Watson.
But there's still the FS Ferdinando Stanley of the Acroxics.
But then I started wondering, is FS Fulk and Sidney?
Oh.
So the whole thing gets hairier yet. But yeah, had I done some homework, I would realize that poem was actually reprinted in Calica, which is Fulk Greville's sonnet sequences. And if you read some Fulk Greville, like Brady was saying, that poem's not very good. Fulk Greville's not a great poet. He's kind of clunky, but he has a lot of cool, gnarly ideas, and he definitely is the atheist of these aristocratic crowd. If anybody's the mindset of Marlowe, it's Fulk Greville, and then maybe Raleigh, and then maybe Bacon. But Fulk Greville, he is the dark, twisted mind talking about the cosmos and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
And that's kind of a well-known fact too. So let me see. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to come back to this attribution thing that Ian brought up. That dude, attribution's so sketchy in this whole Shakespeare scene. I don't understand why is this happening? Because there are other times in history, other kinds of literature, where we can do stylistic readings and we can get our answers. We did it for the Bible. For the longest time, Moses wrote Genesis. We've now done so much stylometric evidence of the Bible that they can pinpoint there's 5 writers of the Genesis, and it's the J1 writer, the J2 writer, the Q writer, the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but so much of that is hidden that's almost a non-existent discussion.
Yeah.
You're right. Have you ever heard of the Gospel of Mary?
Yeah,
Brady?
I have, actually.
Yeah, you have?
All the Apocrypha sort of stuff, Book of Thomas, and,
dude,
a bunch of these other ones.
Dude, Man, the Gospel of Mary's a fucking trip, man.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Like, it is a trip.
Maybe it's the Valentinian one. There are some other ones where it's like it's called like the Secret Book of John, and it's like all about how Jesus is actually like, was some sort of the evil brother to John the Baptist or something. Yeah, just it's all over the place.
Stuff.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
It reads like Greek mythology.
Yeah, some of it does. You're right. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
point was that, like, we probably don't have an exact handle on who exactly wrote the Bible, but, like, we have a much better picture because we've done the stylometric evidence. Let's flash forward to the 1700s. Shout out to Hamilton. What was Hamilton famous for doing? The Federalist Papers? Well, stylometry is invented for Shakespeare, but stylometry, like, gets its first, like, big win doing the Federalist Papers. And so there's like 100-something Federalist Papers. Hamilton's supposed to do most of them.
John Jay,
and Madison. So it's those three.
Hamilton wrote the other 53.
And so trying to figure out who wrote which ones was up for debate because they didn't sign their names on the Federalist Papers. And so, Hamilton claimed X amount, Madison claimed X amount, and some of those overlapped. And they'd be like, well, who wrote it? Is it Madison or Hamilton? And it gets tough because those two write pretty similarly. They write these big sententious sentences that are like 36 words a sentence.
They're so opposite and diametrically opposed.
In ideology.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, within the thing they agree on, they are diametrically opposed. But they do agree on Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, right? But so stylometry, like, was able to go and look at these and say, yo, a lot of these ones that we've been claiming Hamilton are actually Madison. And some of these are written by both. And, like, we've been able to do that. And so it's like, we've been able to, the Anti-Federalist Papers, which were a reaction to these Federalist Papers, there was one written by a guy named Brutus, which was clearly a pen name. Brutus wasn't a real guy's name. And nobody for the longest time could, who's Brutus? They did stylometric evidence, and we now know, I forget who Brutus is, but it's one of the crowd that was part of the Anti-Federalists along with Jefferson and that crowd. And, like, we've been able to do that through stylometric evidence. Why can't we do it with Shakespeare? And
I think, again, like, boiling it down to one name is so reductive. Recently, I saw a video from the playwright of a new musical that hasn't hit Broadway yet. It's called Millennials Are Killing Musical Theater. Yeah.
Feel a little attacked.
Yeah, I felt a little attacked too. But it's mostly a critique on the fact that everyone says millennials are killing everything, right?
Yeah.
But basically, she was saying, I wrote the book music lyrics for Millennials Are Killing Musical Theater. And, but I have an orchestrator. I have a director. I have a music director. I have and she's going on and on. She goes, as much as I am the quote-unquote sole writer of this piece, I don't know anything about orchestrations.
Yeah.
I didn't write that. You know what I mean? Right.
I didn't put that together. Like, this could not exist if it was only me.
Absolutely.
And, like, we get this super heightened, fallacious view of Shakespeare being able to do that because it does get bound together in this big, like...
But that's not how a script would have been in Elizabethan days. No. Like, you would have gotten a piece of paper that had your lines on it.
Yeah.
Because no one had time to sit there and write a script that had everyone's lines.
Because they didn't have copy machines.
Right.
Yeah, for real.
And so you get a little copy of a little prompt book, and their little sections get passed out.
So you're saying an actor isn't going to be like, I don't like this line, or an actor misspeaks it.
Yeah.
As in the case of that famous line.
Yeah, well, so Green Groatsworth's Wit, going back to it, that I think probably written by Chettle. Green Groatsworth's Wit, that's the upstart crow. Well, plenty of Oxfordians have pointed out that, this probably isn't even about Shakespeare the writer. This is about whoever's starring in Shakespeare's play, which is Edward Allen. And so this whole upstart crow plagiarizing, it's not it's not that some writer's going around plagiarizing. It's that this actor who is using y'all's scripts, he's going to butcher your lines and put whatever lines he wants in there. And so that's like maybe the correct reading of Green's Groatsworth's wit. And yeah, it like goes into what he's saying. Like, yeah, the actors are going to try to change the lines. They want to change the lines. Like, a lot of them, as we said, couldn't read, and so they have to memorize it, and they're not going to give it 100% to, you know.
There's also, at a certain point, it would be a liability to the theater to have a full script laying about. Because that's your intellectual property.
And we may have examples of it getting stolen and given to another rival company, or, as Brady and I have said, like, maybe it's not even at the rival
But again,
company.
this whole thing getting stolen also, right? Like, it's kind of, I think as movie guys, novelists, the idea that someone stole a story is something that tangible. But I think to someone who, like, I'll use blues as a good example of this. I'll use theater as a good example of this. It's not stealing.
It's folklore.
It's folklore. Yeah. It's reinventing.
Yeah.
And I think it's ridiculous to be like, we know these Shakespearean stories are folklore stories. We know it. We know these aren't the first instances of these stories.
Yeah. Hamlet, like we brought it up earlier, that like
Saxor Grammaticus,
that Hamlet couldn't have been co-written. Shakespeare's a genius behind Hamlet, but like we have the Hamlet that people say is written by Thomas Kidd, and that like that itself is being reworked from Grammaticus' version of the Hamlet story, which is probably coming from some Viking saga we don't have our hands on anymore.
And I mean, and not to continue to bring it back to Sondheim, but literally the biggest hit on Broadway right now. Do you know what the highest ticket price for Merrily We Roll Along is on Broadway? Sondheim's biggest flop in his entire career. Huh?
Merrily We Roll Along. So this is the one.
Yeah.
Starring Harry Potter.
Yeah, starring Harry Potter, Lindsay Mendez.
So if you got the most expensive ticket to go watch one of their...
Yeah, what are you guessing?
$200?
So recently, it broke the news that the Cabaret came out and said that their most expensive ticket, the show hasn't opened yet, but when it opens, it's going to be starring Eddie Redmayne. And so they said so they said that the most expensive ticket will be $799.
Holy cow.
So Merrily Roll Along said, hold my beer, and said, okay, our top ticket is now $899.
$900?
To go see Harry Potter.
For one ticket. One ticket. And people are paying that, dude.
This was a flop.
This was a flop. It didn't run 2 weeks originally, and now it is making over $2 million a week, charging up to $900 a ticket.
40 years later.
Yeah.
We're in the wrong business, boys.
well, here's the thing. 80% of all Broadway shows are flops.
We had the ring cycle here for 2000. Said Muzzle Ray.
So, yeah.
Coming across the pond.
But, yeah, so things can be failures initially.
Oh, wow.
Things can be massive.
A Wagner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so things can be massive failures one year, and then years later,
dug up and
reinterpreted
totally.
with Daniel fucking Radcliffe starring in it.
I would guess that's what happens with Hamlet. Like, I don't know that Hamlet was a total absolute bust like Merrily, but like the Hamlet does not have the success of like Jew of Malta or Tamburlaine or Spanish Tragedy or the Henry plays. Like it's kind of, you see it mentioned in Henslow and then it's kind of gone.
And what's crazy to me is even people who love Sondheim, they're like, oh, I love Sondheim, but I've never seen this show before. It's like, bro, a recording came out in, like, what, 2011? It's been out. It's been out.
Yeah.
You can watch it. There's no reason not to watch it, other than it doesn't star Daniel Radcliffe.
And, like, yeah, for the longest time, nobody wanted to rewatch it. And all of a sudden, now there's some tipping point, and everybody's like, oh, dude, I totally missed that. And part of that tipping point's probably totally fueled by the fact that
He
Sondheim
died.
Yeah.
Yeah, he died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he died recently. So that is part of this, for sure. But there's also, like, Sweeney Todd did not make money. It lost money when it opened on Broadway. Sunny in the Park at George, what we watch, is also considered probably his most famous, most notable work. Did not make money. Company did not make money. All of his hits are stuff in earlier in his career before he found his voice, before he became the Sondheim that we know and love.
And it's like, it reminds you of a lot of, like, going back to blues, it reminds you of some of these blues artists that, like, yeah, they record and they, do their best blues work and then they die, and then, like, the Herman Melville thing. Like, and of course, yeah, Sondheim was...
He was 90. Yeah, also, when he died.
Like, yeah, Sondheim was clearly extremely successful and was well heralded and well loved, but, like, yeah, people are still catching on.
Well, he was never commercially successful. And he still, until this year, was not commercially successful.
And, like, that's such a, like, it's funny because Ian, has brought up the Sondheim Shakespeare thing, but as we've discussed it, I think maybe a better example to Sondheim is Ben Jonson. That, like, Ben Jonson's the one that immediately after he's gone, that's the one that everybody loves and heralds in the 1600s. But, like, some of Ben Jonson's plays were, like, flops. Like, his two tragedies, like, Sejanus and Catiline.
But at the time, Ben Jonson was lauded.
Yeah, he was lauded definitely for his
like
comedies.
if you were in pre-Victorian eras, pre-1600s, like, he would be more of a name than Shakespeare.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the longest running show? Do you mean on the West End? Do you mean musical? Do you mean all show? Because I think the longest running production, I believe, is Mousetrap by Agatha Christie in London.
Okay.
Which has run like 70-something fucking years.
Okay.
And then the longest currently running musical on Broadway is Chicago, which I love because it's no longer Phantom of the Opera. Fuck Phantom of the Opera. And
shots fired.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can make more money out of a flop than you can a hit.
Yep. Absolutely.
And Ian's also a big Mel Brooks fan.
I'm a big Mel Brooks fan. But that is also another example of a project that did not hold up.
Yeah, the producers itself literally, like, lived it out, yeah.
Right, like, it's funny, they made it into a musical, everyone loved it, and then they tried to make the musical into a movie musical, and everyone was like, you just redid the stage again, why the fuck are we watching this?
Yeah, and also Rocky Horror.
Rocky Horror, yeah.
Oh, I love me some Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Rocky Horror's great. But I really would encourage anyone who's out there who hasn't touched Sondheim, if you have any interest in Shakespeare.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, Sondheim is not a far
not a far
jump.
cry at all, yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, like, I wish that we could get some of that data, like, we get some of that data with Henslow Diary, like, which plays were successful or not, but I wish we had it directly for Shakespeare. I wish we could just, like, pull open the front and say, this is how much money this made box office style.
Or even how many, like, what was the schedule? Like, how many, how often did a show get produced?
Yeah, and, like, I just wish we had that, because, like, I wonder if, like, a similar phenomenon happens with Shakespeare, that, like, some of these maybe weren't well loved, and that, like, maybe that's why they don't get printed till the folio, and, but, like, sure enough, decades or centuries after Shakespeare, all of these plays are getting redone, maybe not as often as some others, but, like, they are. One thing that Ian and I are going to do after this podcast, we're going to try and go find on the Royal Shakespeare Company a video of maybe some plays by not Shakespeare, by maybe Marlowe or Webster or something, because like as much as it's great seeing Shakespeare get dug up and reperformed more, I think if like we want to have a real revolution in Shakespeare studies, we need to pull up the whole entire era.
And look, also I feel like when you have someone like Shakespeare who might have been so fundamental, their influence is going to be found, right?
Right.
And when we talk about artists, yeah, there can be artists that are amazing and they made hit after hit after hit. But even for someone, for me, like, I don't, none of Sondheim's individual shows are one of my favorite shows. Does that make sense?
No, yeah.
But he consistently, there's no other artist who had more than one banger the way Sondheim had more than one banger. Yeah. And it's like, no, but Sondheim's like on 5 or 6. It's like other ones, it's like you're struggling to have 2.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think of a good analogy for myself for that.
But almost like, people talk a lot about Marlowe, but the only thing I ever hear from Marlowe is Jew of Malta.
Yeah.
And
Faustus.
Yeah, Faustus.
Faustus, there you go, Faustus. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
You have to get into, like, Renaissance era circles to start talking about Tamburlaine. Nobody talks about Edward II.
I feel like no one even talks about, as far as, like, unless you're, like, specifically diving into English literature like you did as a major, it's like, I have no idea who Ben Jonson is. I've never heard of that name, blah, 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 blah. Even if, like, maybe in high school they've got some Ben Jonson quote talking about Shakespeare or something.
Right.
No idea who Ben Jonson is, but you said, like, The Alchemist and some of that other stuff.
The
some of the
Alchemist
best
is
stuff.
the best comedy that I've read still.
Yeah.
The Alchemist is so funny. It's so good. Like, it needs to be made into a movie. Like, it can very easily be made into this great little screwball comedy. And, like, I don't know, like,
why is that not our project?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, well, yeah. Yeah,
you just blew so much smoke up its ass.
I've done it on several of our videos. Another one that I think needs to have a resurgence, and we talked about him a lot, John Webster. I don't know why John Webster's not the biggest thing on the planet right now, with all our pro-feminism, in the wake of all the Me Too movement, women's empowerment. That's what John Webster's most famous stuff is about, and critiquing that, and like maybe some of our feminism today is like directly influenced from John Webster, and we have not gotten a John Webster resurgence. And I think it's specifically because the Orthodox mainstream gatekeepers, if you will, are keeping John Webster down. They don't want John Webster to get talked about because it's a real hairy issue. He kind of writes a little too similar to Shakespeare, and all of a sudden we got to look at Handy closer. We got to start looking at a lot of plays closer.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler.
Have you... So this may be off topic, but it's a Shakespeare topic, so I'm gonna...
Okay.
Yeah. Have you talked to him much about what I told you about, like, David Garrick?
No. Yep. We brought it up a little bit with the balcony thing, but, like, go into...
Yeah. Okay, so, have you ever heard of David Garrick before? Okay. So David Garrick was a director of theater in the 1700s.
Okay.
He's a student of Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson.
Right.
Okay.
So clearly, he's very involved. Think he would be around when he's working. These are the same years that the bust of Shakespeare was.
Yeah. He's part of that
erected.
1740 monument crowd.
Okay.
Right, and he is, like I said, a director. He's also an actor. Okay, and he starts doing productions of Shakespeare, but he starts editing out chunks that he finds are objectionable. Like shittin'. And apparently, for the longest time, most of the, like, records, the versions of Shakespeare we have are David Garrick abridged versions.
And so, like, ultimately, I've been really harsh on the Victorians. In a lot of our videos, I come back and say, guys, Shakespeare's been put on a pedestal in isolation because of Victorian scholars having these ridiculous Puritan morals. But, like, that predates Victorian era itself. Like David Garrick starting that like already in the 1740s, where it's like, no, we got to clean up Shakespeare. And like if you read Dr. Johnson, you can hear Dr. Johnson saying that, and I know a lot of Oxfordians might say that it mirrors what Philip Sidney's saying, that no, we got to have this real expressly moral intent in our literature. It's got to, and so like anytime you have a character doing something immoral, it's like, scratch that. And like, you know, for us, it's like, no, that's when the stuff's at its best, is when, you know, Barabbas is over there, you know, knocking off heads and stuff. But like for them, they're like, no, we're not going to read Tamburlaine anymore.
And a lot of the things, like for instance in Romeo and Juliet, he took out all of the gender ambiguity in Romeo and Juliet. So, you know, there's a lot of references that a lot of the people tell Romeo that he needs to stop crying.
Act like a man.
He needs to act like a man, comport himself more like a man. Well, they took that out because...
They don't want to have Romeo as this little...
Right, so Romeo's a man now. Also, conversely, Juliet is in charge of her sexual freedom.
Much
right?
like Penelope Rich.
But in these Victorian versions, they take away these lines where she, you know, asserts her sexual freedom over the other men and uses her kind of sexual sway.
And then all of a sudden she becomes this super cloistered damsel character.
Which is totally
the opposite.
Not Juliet.
No. Like, and yeah, any of you Mary Sidney fans out there, like, that want to say Shakespeare's a woman, like, it's been so difficult to say things like that because of people like David Garrick.
Right, absolutely.
And, like, honestly, you know, me and Brady have been pitching our Philip Sidney thing. I'm going to keep pitching it. Because at some point, like, the original reading, the pre-Garrick reading of Romeo and Juliet should probably exactly mirror Philip Sidney and Penelope Rich. And what he described is an exact description of what we think of when we think of Philip Sidney. This kind of, you know, oh, woe is me, my heart's broken, I don't know what to do.
Overly or like overly emotional.
Yeah, super sensitive, heightened sensitivity.
Yes.
And like you see it in the Hamlet character too. But like, and then Penelope Rich or Penelope Devereux being this woman that like is totally sexually open and free and like totally willing to cross conventions and boundaries. This is the woman that was married with Robert Rich, one of the most powerful dudes in the country. And she's like, no, I'm not going to live with you anymore. I'm going to go live with this guy. Yeah, screw it. I'm married to this guy now. It's like, no, you're not. That's not lawfully what's happening. She's like, I don't care. That's what I'm doing anyway. Like, that's totally the Juliet character. And, like, once more, like, what's the difference in age between Romeo and Juliet? 4 or 5 years? Like, Penelope Devereux and Philip are, what, 7 years apart? It's like, it's the same kind of dynamic, same exact dynamic.
That's and if you're taking our read, it's a sort of also that unforbidden love too, in that Sidney obviously wants to be with Penelope, but Cecil and the crowd have some other machinations.
Yeah,
you know?
Like it's not gonna work out.
But what is really cool about this, and I think is the reason why we're still talking about this story and why it hasn't been completely lost to time.
It's part of our folklore, something about it,
is because there's no textual explanation for why these two families are conflicting, right? Yeah. So that it allows the director, as a director of, you know, drama, to subtextually add whatever they can.
It's almost like there's just a generic faction that ever dwells at court. But, like the opening line of Magliero Square. You know?
But like, I'm so serious. You can so easily make this dispute between the two families anything. You can make it racial. You can make it ethnic. You can make it about. I saw the same. Yeah, politics. I saw someone who's great. Who's like, we really need a trans version of Romeo and Juliet, where we have Romeo being a trans man, right? And people are telling him, well, if you want to be a man, you gotta act more like a man, right? And like that hits different, right?
Yeah, like total reinterpretation, and like this is what you're talking about with specificity allowing universality,
right? Or someone saying, hey, Juliet, you gotta wait for that man to come to you. You shouldn't be in charge of your own freedom. And her saying, like, oh no, I'm going to take it anyway. Doesn't that ring a little bit more true if you're a trans female?
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, that's the cool thing, like you said, about where specificity creates universality.
Yeah, like, this is probably modeled directly on Philip Sidney and Penelope Devereaux, but being directly modeled on them makes the characters so realized that we can now
Have that multiplicity.
and put anybody in it. And
it's so real, it's so authentic, that it transcends or something.
And Sondheim even said, and this is something that he also said is one of the reasons why he thinks Shakespeare was so talented, was that he was working with the same company over and over again. And he goes, he knew who he was writing for.
Yeah.
And he goes, so the best songs in musical theater, they're when someone, you've cast that show, you're in out-of-town tryouts, and a lot of people say, oh, it's because you're in out-of-town tryouts, you're in the weeks before it opens, and it's crush time, and you got a thing. He goes, no, I think it's because you've seen the show work, you've seen how it works, and you know the actor playing this role better, so you can write something more specific for them.
Yeah. So, you know that this actor can...
That this monologue, whatever,
this
highlights...
Yeah, I had you in mind when I wrote this part or something like that. Yeah.
Right. He goes, if I had it my way, I wouldn't write a damn thing until it was cast.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, like, it's not this limitless, expansive... And, like, that may explain some of the reworking. Like, why would a play get reworked? Well, it's getting played for a different company.
Not only that, but why are there the same tropes in Shakespeare plays over and over? It's because the same players are playing it.
And I'm gonna bring this back and sort of undercut what you're saying. Because, Shakespeare is believed to have written, after a certain year, after like 1594-95, it's for the Chamberlain's Men, which turns into the King's Men, and he's supposed to only be writing for that group. But before 1594, it's all kind of up in the air because we don't have the actual documentation to say if Shakespeare's writing for this. We just have Henslow's Diary, which have names of Shakespeare plays like Henry VI, and those are being played for Lord Strange's group in one section, and then they're being played for Lord Pembroke's group in another section. And so what you can sort of figure out is that, oh snap, Henry VI Part 2 and Part 3, those are being played by Lord Strange's Men. That's an older thing. And so they know that because Lord Strange's Men only had 10 people in it, and the parts are where you could do it exactly for 10 or 11 people. Mm-hmm. But then if you look at Henry VI, it requires like 16 people. So... Right. Henry VI Part 1, it requires like 16 people, and so it's like, why would the first one require more, and then the second and third one require less, especially if the first one that requires more, if that's being done by an acting company that only has 10 or 11 guys, how can it have 16 parts?
No, it has to be the...
I
understand the logic now.
They realize, this one's being written after for this later group, Pembroke's Men. And, of course... Strangest Men, Pembroke's Men, this is the crowd that we think is maybe behind the Shakespeare project. But, like, that's because we look for who are these parts being written for. We can actually maybe try and date these plays. We can try and specify when and where this would have been written, why it would have been written even. And so, like, I'm glad you brought that up, that, this attribution question, we can literally just ask, who are these parts being written for?
Kind of like a crazy Sudoku thing, where it's like if you can prove that one guy was particularly good for this kind of role, then maybe you can suss out with the dates, you know?
Yeah, like, I get that, but there's still shows that are being performed long after the original cast, right?
Right.
Because, like, a lot of the times when you talk about Broadway, it's like, oh, he was in Hamilton. Cool. When? Like, in 2016, was he in the original Broadway cast? Is he on the album? Or did he play it for, like, a week? Or did he... Yeah, there's 3 different national tour companies.
Yeah, and then if they ever make a movie version, is he the one in the movie version? Like,
right, like, not to mention, like, there's people that go on. There's someone who only played Hamilton once because 3 people were sick. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's
That's true. That's very true.
like
And I'm glad you brought that up because Henry VI Part 2 and Part 3 are themselves reworkings of earlier plays. Like, for the longest time, there was these plays, The True Contention and The True Tragedy. And people couldn't figure out, they're like, dude, The True Contention's like the same thing as Henry Part 2. And True Tragedy's like the same thing as Henry Part 3, but they're like, not as good. And so for the longest time, people were like, oh yeah, they're just bootlegs. They're bootlegs of those plays. They're knockoff versions. But then people like realize that like, no, some of the stuff in here like seems references to the 80s. And so like, why would a bootleg of a 90s play have references to the 80s? And it's like, oh wait, these are actually the first or the earlier versions, and that what we're thinking is like the original perfect play is actually a reworking of these earlier versions. And then those reworked versions end up getting a prequel later, which is Henry VI Part 1. And then so now that we look at them as... And then those still get reworked up into the publication. And so when we look at it, we're like, oh no, those were all written together. But like, as soon as you start diving into it and looking at it closely, it's like, these are not all written together. These are written at separate times. They're reworked. They're written by separate authors even within them. Like for instance, the first act of Part 1 has this character Winchester. He is a cardinal in Act 1. Act 2 through Act 5, he's a bishop. You don't get demoted from cardinal to bishop. You get promoted until you die. And so it's like, why is he a cardinal in this? And so I was arguing with Vet Stadium on one of our comic boards. He's like, well, no, that's DeVere wrote Act 1 when he was younger, and came back and wrote the rest of the acts. Or he wrote all the rest of he wrote the whole play and then rewrote Act 1 later. So either he wrote it before or after. But like,
whatever I need it to be.
But either way, it doesn't make sense that DeVere let this total plot slip happen that Winchester's a cardinal in Act 1, and then Act 2 through 5, he's a bishop. And he actually becomes a cardinal in Act 5 at the very end. So why would you have him start out as a cardinal, other than it's a total slip-up, and the editors, when they grouped up the play, didn't look it over closely, they had to bang it out, boom, they got it out. And it's like, it's because whoever wrote Act 1 wasn't sitting down with the rest of the guys writing the other acts. And it's like, that's the only explanation. We have multiple authors. Henry VI Part 1 is proof of at least 2 authors in the Shakespeare canon. And like, whether or not Oxfordians want to accept all the other stuff like Middleton or Fletcher, blah blah blah, you have to acknowledge that Act 1 is written by a different author than the rest of the acts, and you probably have to acknowledge that that author is the Thomas Nash, or what I would call the Thomas Decker Nash hand. And so we can isolate the Thomas Decker Nash hand in the first part of Henry VI. Anybody that says, oh, that's also Shakespeare, that's because that's also popping up in other places than Shakespeare, but that's not the same guy that's writing the other parts that they also call Shakespeare. So we have 2 different writers. Who's writing the other parts? Who's the one that we call Shakespeare and not Nash? That's still up for looking into. I would say that's our Webster hand. So we got our Decker hand, our Webster hand, and then who else do we have in there?
Chettle.
It's probably Chettle, because people have surmised that, oh, there's probably Robert Greene in here, and he's maybe banging out the early stuff. So Chettle, Webster,
Drayton.
Decker. I don't think we have Drayton in this one.
Well, other than Stotzenberg, they say there's a Samuel Daniel hand in there.
So
mostly a sonnets thing.
I don't think Samuel Daniel seems to pop up right around the sonnets, and so that's 93 and after, and so this is right before that.
Okay.
So like, it's almost like Samuel Daniel, but like, I would say Samuel Daniel's the one that people want to say that's the Shakespeare hand. That's the one writing the lines in Richard II. But I think the Samuel Daniel hand may very well be the same as the Webster hand. It gets a little difficult to parse out. But there's other people that say, oh no, there's Kidd and Marlowe are also writing in this, or Kidd and or Marlowe are writing in this. And so who are those hands? That has to be worked out. But yeah, ultimately, what names am I saying? Decker, Chettle, Webster. It's the Henslow Diary guys. It's the same writers.
Right.
So whoever's putting out the King's Men and Chamberlain plays, same guys the ones putting out the Admiral plays. They're just getting a little different treatment, a little differently reworked. Yep.
But I mean, again, that is the nature of theater.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, like, we had this conversation yesterday where I feel like the conversation about Shakespeare authorship is way too much novel based. It's like people who have only ever read or dealt with novels are trying to use novel logic on theater attribution.
We're definitely guilty of that.
And because it's just like, yeah, no, it's a show. You put it on, you play it, you see what works, you see what doesn't work, and then it transforms. And most of the time, it transforms into something better, right? Like you hone it.
Right.
But there are many circumstances on Broadway where something started out pretty good, but then people kept messing with it.
And it got worse.
Yeah. And that thing that was so cool about it originally was gone. And then the piece, like, ceased to work anymore. Seussical comes to mind.
Okay.
The Dr. Seuss musical.
It's what a lot of people in Shakespeare's era said about what happened to Sidney's Arcadia. Like that, Florio and some others are supposed to have touched up Sidney's Arcadia when it got published, but like everybody's like, oh, this is worse. And like, of course, me and Brady loved that reading because it's like, yeah, like. You're not gonna do it better. Like, come on, guys.
Hands
like,
getting all over this. What do y'all think?
Yeah, and of course, I don't know. We need to talk about John Florio way more.
Yes.
I'm so sorry to you, Florians out there. We have not done our due diligence there. Same with Bacon. I did some Bacon stuff, but I got to go way deeper into Bacon.
There's just so much to cover.
There's so much, guys.
My problem with like assuming that Bacon was doing it is, man's busy.
Yeah, I totally agree with some of that argument too.
Like,
do these people ever have any spare time to do anything?
And as a theater person, I could see Bacon coming along and being like, I'm sure there aren't theater people out there, but being like an Alex Lacamoire and coming along and someone who collaborates with a lot of writers, but isn't necessarily a writer himself.
I always kind of saw him as maybe like like a consultant or something,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I to give you some context, Alex Lacamoire did the orchestrations for both Hamilton and Dear Evan Hansen, two of the biggest musicals that hit, and they were the Tony Award winners for 2016 and 2017 respectively, even though if you want to make any theater nerd angry, bring up the 2017 Tonys. But the fact is the man, he did the orchestrations for both of those shows at the same time. At the same time is the thing that gets me.
And like, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that does happen with our writers back then. Like Decker, people like that are banging out plays. Like they are having to do stuff. Like I'm writing one section of one play for this play at the same time as writing a section for this play. I'll be honest, guys. I haven't done my Bacon research, but I'm pretty convinced that. Bacon is writing a bunch of Shakespeare. Like,
you think he's definitely the Decker?
I think he's the Decker Nash. Like, I do.
I like that because, well, it seemed that because, Bacon's kind of clinical on some of that approach to the political writings that he's actually known for.
Yeah.
And so some of those biting essays, especially that's when it would have been a little younger, like early 20s or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That kind of just makes a lot of sense to me. He's going to do all that.
I see him more as an opinionated patron.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting take.
Okay. The only reason I say, like, for me...
But, like, a patron that, like, has so much gravitas that you'll listen to him when he's opinionated.
Yeah. Like, for me, like, you guys maybe start to figure out my methodological biases, my... ideological and epistemological biases, but like, Brady giggles. He knows where I'm going with this. Like, we don't really need all this history stuff, guys. Like, we can probably all this biography. Like, we can just toss it out. We probably don't. I know this is crazy talk. Don't unsubscribe. I'm being partly.
Sound like a Stratfordian.
I'm being partly facetious. I know I am sometimes a wolf in sheep's clothing, but like, honestly, guys, like, I truly think that like. We can toss all that out and just treat this stylistically 100% only looking at the letters, only looking at the words. We're not going to get 100% accurate stuff because there's so many little things that we can't account for, like editing, misspelling, people coming in giving ideas, stuff like that. But like,
or homage.
Yeah, or homage for sure. But like, by and large, like, I think that if we can get a big enough data set, we should be able to look at, like, okay, Francis Bacon wrote a lot of stuff. We should be able to look at his writings and say, is this stylistically similar at all? And if it is, can we do some scrutiny? And like, I haven't done that well enough, but like, Bacon's famous poem is Life as a Bubble. And like, Bacon's not a great poet. He's really not. Like, it's clunky, it's weird, it's knick-knocky, it's like, it's short and staccato. But like, guess how they spot Nash? It's short and staccato. It's these dense little inverted quips, which is exactly how Bacon's poetry goes. And guess what? Nash/Decker didn't really write poetry. All these other ones, like Drayton totally writes poetry. Chettle totally writes poetry. Marlowe totally writes poetry. Shakespeare totally writes poetry. Nash and Decker, that's not their thing. Pamphlets, plays, not poems. And like, I don't know, that like fits with me for Bacon. Like, Bacon's not like some meter versification guy. He's an idea words guy.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, so that lines up. And so
he's like, I don't work for the muse works for me, type of thing,
Yeah,
or whatever,
like,
right? Yeah, he's like, I'm not heeding the call. He's like, no, I'm gonna stretch it.
I don't know. I just
what
feel
want
like,
to do.
in response to the comments, I just feel like, I mean, Bacon's body of work outside of poetry is pretty intense.
Okay. Yeah.
His contribution to the sciences, to art.
Yeah. So here's the thing about Bacon, though. Almost all his essays are from his late life. That all gets published late life. And so people have asked, like, is he not writing in his early life? Like, where's the early life? And, like, that may coincide real well with, Thomas Nash has a bunch of writings in early life.
Right. And that's what it been, because, people I've seen paired it up, maybe not with the Thomas Nash Decker thing, but when they were saying that Bacon maybe is doing some of that stuff or some of those writings, he's like still coming up to that lawyer college or whatever, the same place that I guess Oxford went to as well. But yeah, they kind of lines up. He's like student finishing out some of that stuff, and here's some of your extra assignments is to write some of this material or whatever. Once again, I always like pointing back to that episode 1 of like sort of like don't throw out all the biography because it's like, well, all these dudes are hanging out in the same house, so it's like everyone wants to be only Oxford, or in our case, like lots of Sydney, or only Bacon. It's like, well, all these people are hanging around in the same small circles anyway. Yeah, they're all interrelated. Most of their goals are going to be more aligned with each other than anyone else, and for that matter.
And again, we've talked about War of the Roses.
Yeah,
like there can be these conflicts, and again, bringing it to modern, right? In the 70s. There were two kind of geniuses. Again, Bob Fosse, right? He's the guy who did Chicago. He's the guy who did, Pippin. And then you have Sondheim, right? They're both working in that time. They're antithetical to each other.
Yeah.
They have the same director on most of their shows.
Yeah. And and because of that, their works do seem sort of oddly similar.
Yeah, I mean, if you take Pippin, Pippin fits really well in with a lot of Sondheim work.
I was thinking Pippin for sure.
Chicago fits in with a lot of Sondheim work. I think you found Hal Prince being attracted to the nihilism, right?
Yeah.
The really dark, dramatic source material,
and
right?
Also, the experimentalist stuff, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, let's move away from just telling some simple story. Let's get a bunch of complex ideas.
Pippin, as much as we think of it as a fun story about finding our meaning in life, it's about a man who's trying to find reason to not commit suicide.
Yeah, honestly, it's a man trying to justify suicide.
And at the end of the show, someone suggests, well, you should just light yourself on fire. Wouldn't that be better than continuing to live a life, than going home with your wife and your children? Wouldn't it just be better to light yourself on fire?
Does he do it? Spoilers?
No. Pippin decides he's gonna go home and spend his life with his family. But like that is something that that's pretty intense. That's pretty brutal for something that is considered one of the fluff pieces of musical theater.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think honestly the reason why it's considered a fluff piece is because there was a junior version that went out, whereas like honestly one of the cool things I honestly kind of want to show it to you before we leave is that the dance sequence, the trio, which is basically war. It's Fosse wanted to get people hard on the idea of war. Stoke the idea of death that so much that it excited people.
Same thing Kubrick does with Dr. Strangelove.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
it's all something that Thomas Pynchon would have wrote about.
But do you know? So I bet you don't know who Fosse is. Do you know what Fosse is most famous for?
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Oh, okay.
The jazz hands guy. The jazz hands guy is the guy who wrote a musical about justifying not killing yourself.
And like Ian and Trey have brought this up in one of their videos. Go check it out. But Bob Fosse may be most famous today, influentially speaking, through Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Check out our channel. We have a video on our channel about how
so much of Michael's choreography is originally
everything that you think is classic Michael Jackson is not classic Michael Jackson.
It's classic Bob Fosse.
It's classic Bob Fosse.
Really?
And what's crazy is, do you know who was supposed to be the original director of Thriller?
The music video? Mm-hmm. No.
Bob Fosse.
Bob
Really?
Fosse.
Yeah.
Because he saw Michael Jackson saw Fosse when he was like 11 or 12 and lost his shit. Like, was just... he insisted being on the original cast recording of Pippin, so you have little like 10-year-old Michael Jackson doing a cover of that on the first album of Pippin. The Jackson 5 also did another cover of a different song on the first album of Pippin. Oh yeah, it's crazy. And you go back and you watch Pippin, and everything that you think is like classic Michael Jackson style, it's in Pippin.
Interesting.
Like even not just his dance moves, but his costuming. The way Michael dresses.
Yeah.
The hat down, the
hat, like
the high water pants with the socks showing with the gliders.
That is not Michael Jackson.
That's Bob.
That is not Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Should we pull like a clip of your video?
Yeah. Play. I don't mind if y'all play the video. Hold on. How are you getting a copyright
This one?
complaint? Yeah.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Trey and Ian's Broadway show. Now for today's video, I will be going through the wonderful connection between the one and only Bob Fosse and Michael
The
Jackson.
Key and Peele.
Don't even know what that is.
Thriller eyes.
There's been huge speculation as to who inspired Michael Jackson and where did he get his style of dance from. People have given credit to Fred Astaire for Smooth Criminal, the Electric Boogaloo for the Moonwalk, even Bill Bailey.
Yeah, shut up.
Recorded Moonwalk. I have given credit.
I showed y'all Bill Bailey.
Yeah.
Okay.
For Beat It. But Michael Jackson himself has given all of his credit to
Also,
James,
Sondheim.
known as the Godfather of Soul. Going on with this, Michael Jackson has been seen to incorporate dances from all of his idols. It's not really too far out of the ordinary. He did this with a lot of his dance numbers, actually, which the ones I just named off. I'm not here to say that all of these people are wrong for saying that those people inspired him, because if we're being honest, they did. But for some reason, people seem to leave off Bob Fosse for not only inspiring Michael Jackson, but inspiring what a dance number can be and what a music video can be as well. For the most part, I'm pretty sure you guys know who Michael Jackson is, and for the most part, I'm assuming that you guys don't know who Bob Fosse is. Now, I don't want to dive too much into Fosse because I can honestly talk about that man for hours. I'm just a huge
Which,
fan
by the way, if you haven't seen the show, Fosse Verdon on Hulu.
Yeah, Rockwell.
So the same Rockwell as Bob Fosse. Fucking great.
Yeah, I guess go ahead, skip ahead. See, do you have that clip where Fosse's doing like?
Okay, a good one to throw on if you want to see how. Oh no, go there. Yeah, go there. So, there's two sequences that I would point you to if you want to see how Michael Jackson 100% influenced, or how Bob Fosse 100% influenced Michael Jackson. First one is the one we're watching right now. This is Glory from Pippin. And I think you can see a lot of the hip movements that become very typical of Michael Jackson, but also like see how he's using his hands. Hands were a big kind of Fosse trait, right? About using your elbows. Fosse had weak knees. He was not a good traditional ballet dancer. He had sloping shoulders. So instead of trying to do dance moves that would hide this, he created dance moves that accentuated, his gangly body that shouldn't have existed, right? And so, in that one you see it. There's also another one that, if you could actually pull up, called Snake in the Grass. So a lot of people.
Fosse.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really need. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one I'm thinking.
So this is the one that.
This one's so.
Oh, we gotta watch the ad here real quick.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Show it on our YouTube channel.
I'm a vegetarian, so I won't buy it. Well, it's only $3. Never mind, guys. I gotta do it. Okay, so this is one where this is where Michael gets his outfit.
Fast forward a little bit. Yeah. That's probably good right there. So yeah. Okay. First of all, this outfit.
Yeah.
This fucking outfit. Look at that pose.
That's Michael.
That's
right?
Michael.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually a benefit of this actually being Bob Fosse, because usually you see Fosse choreography.
Yeah, that
and
is
it's not
actually Fosse himself.
Bob Fosse performing it. But, oh my god. And I love that he has a cigarette coming out. Or a cigarette coming out.
There it is. There it is. That's
Yeah.
But that move is him being a cobra, right? Because he's supposed to be a snake. And also, he does a kind of proto moonwalk in this dance as well. Like, geez, I mean, look at that. That is that's Michael Jackson. That's Michael Jackson. The pelvic thrust.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
having the kid in the. No, I'm kidding.
The pelvic thrust and a child. It's 100% Michael Jackson.
Oh my god.
But yeah, I remember he showed me, because I remember him and Trey were pitching this to me, and I'm, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm a big Michael fan. Like, I grew up absolutely loving Michael's music.
This
specifically
broke you a
his
little
dance.
bit.
I was like, okay, guys, sure, yeah, Michael watched theater, I'm sure he did, yeah, Bob Fosse, neat, guys, that's cool. And they showed me this video, and I was like, what the what?
Michael Jackson's alive.
Yeah, he's a plagiarist. Like. But at the same time, that goes back into our whole Philip Sidney is a syncretist. Like, Michael syncretized all these different people that Trey pointed out.
Yeah.
Michael syncretized Bill Bailey, Electric Boogaloo, James Brown, Bob Fosse, Fred Astaire into what is still today the paramount height of pop dance.
I just feel like there is more Fosse than there is Nicholas Brothers, than there's Fred Astaire, than there is James Brown. You know what I mean?
Important part.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, he's Freddie or Otis to Peter Green. Like he's.
And I'm not sitting here and trying to say this is like the coolest dance sequence on the face of the planet.
Let's make a Shakespeare analogy. He is Ovid to Shakespeare. Like Shakespeare, clearly Seneca. All these different writers that are influencing Shakespeare, but it's Ovid the ones influencing the most. That said, we could probably wrap it up here. This was a fun little tangent, and Ian and I never.
I'm sorry, tangents are my thing.
Yeah, tangents are always game. We'll talk politics, religion. Anything.
Two people with extreme ADHD.
Yeah.
You should look up Michael Jackson's boxing.
Oh.
Michael Jackson boxing.
Okay. We'll check that out. Thanks, Sultan. And guys, thanks so much for tuning in these live streams. Sorry we didn't get to announce it sooner, so it would have been nice to have a little more heads up. But thank you guys for showing up when you did. We need to. William Alexander is supposed to have added to Arcadia. Sorry, I didn't see that comment earlier. It was Florio Alexander and a couple others, but I've also seen what's it? Jake Roberts says that William Alexander is Sydney.
Yeah. Oh, Dizzy.
Yeah,
Okay.
Earl of Sterling. Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember that.
Alexander. I see the name connection there, so that's interesting.
Oh yeah. Okay, I didn't think of that part. Okay.
But yeah, dude. Let's go ahead and call it here. Thank you so much, Ian, for coming in. This was a really cool thing. We've been talking about doing this for a while. Ian and I talk on the phone all the time. He's over in Austin. We're in Houston, so we can't do this all the time. But anytime he's in town, or if we go up there, we're gonna do this because this discussion's it's excellent. It's awesome. We're bridging two different worlds. I
love that we both love theater. Completely different theater.
Or literature,
Right, completely different theater, 100%. And I'm going to try to drag you to see some more in-person theater because there's nothing quite like seeing theater live.
Yeah, and also just shout out to Ian. He and I tried to do a podcast about a decade ago. Maybe more than a decade ago.
Oh, yeah.
And it was over film. It was called The Fanboy and the Critic. He was the fanboy. He was a big Marvel superhero guy. Still kind of is. I was, and still kind of am, big-time critic, old school, art house movies. And so we were going to juxtapose those ideas. And we did one podcast and didn't keep it going because it was a lot of legwork and we were young. But somehow that still continued. And then Brady's brought that back out. And he's like, Chance, you got to do this. And Ian separately started doing it with Trey. And so it's guys, let's get this podcast and keep going. Let's keep talking. Let's get the discussion going. Let's get everybody talking about Shakespeare. Let's get people talking about theater. Let's get people talking about reading, literature. Because, it's the future and technology is great and all that, but we can't stop with this stuff. This is what makes us. I'm such a humanist on the inside. So, thanks for tuning in, guys. Any last thoughts?
No, just kind of hitting on that same thing about, because Shakespeare, we do take it from such that novelist sort of point of view, because that's how
literature.
We usually consumed it. Yeah, it's literature, something that we read, but we can't forego the whole sort of the
what
original,
the reality of the situation is.
Yeah, exactly, and how much of that medium message are we losing by not accommodating it, or sort of bringing it into discussion?
And now that we're aware
especially
of it,
not for
can we
authorship.
find it?
Yeah, and for authorship too, exactly how he's pointing out. It's dude, I don't know how any one person would have written one or two good plays, let alone 36 plus plays, apparently,
right?
On their own or whatever, right? And we've shown in the Henzo Diary, he's sort of pointing out with all this sort of stuff, collaboration is definitely the norm and not the exception here. No. Just to kind of reiterate, group theory and all these sorts of people involved, from our aristocratic sort of marionetters all the way down to the theater owners and the actors and all these people involved.
Right, because you have everyone from your funders to your writers to the people who your writers trust and believe, to your actors who are touching it, to the critics who are reacting to it. It's entirely reductive to put one person's name on a piece of theater.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah, we'll call it there, guys.
Yeah, so as always, our usual tagline here as we sign off for the night is always go watch your theater in person and go read the text yourselves, but nullius in verba.